Or are you tired of the,
All right, so I have all my information
Belichick,
here.
Brady? More? You tired of
My whole wad.
The same.
Congratulations on your award
thank you.
and recognition. That was awesome.
Thank you, it was.
Certainly
It's
well
nice-
deserved.
Nice to be recognized.
Yeah, I'm glad your mom got to go.
Oh, yeah. She liked
Yeah,
that.
I bet she did.
You're just in time. Let's call the meeting to order, please.
Council workshop meeting, Monday, October 4th, 2021, 6 p.m. Hydrich.
Here.
Holtmeyer.
Here.
Patke. Pettit.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Scornia.
Yes.
Solentrup. Wessels. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will all the committee members answer if they have or have not read the minutes of the meeting dated September 7th, 2021? Hydrich.
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Pettit.
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Scornia.
Yes.
Solentrup. Wessels.
Having read the minutes, are there any comments or questions? Any corrections?
The motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Sullentrup, to approve the minutes from our last meeting dated September 7, 2021. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the minutes. Thank you.
Presentations, Lime scooters.
Sal?
Is that TV still hooked up, Sal?
Oh, yeah, I'll turn it on.
I can get that while you're doing that.
All right. Good evening. I believe at the last workshop meeting in September, we let you know that the 6-month trial period for the Lime scooters was up October 5th, which is tomorrow. And so we said we would have on the agenda tonight a proposal for the 2-year contract, just kind of an overview, and then later on the council agenda is the actual ordinance for the 2-year proposal. So I'll kind of go through what the traffic committee has reviewed, what has happened over the last 6 months, changes already, and then what the 2-year contract looks like, the proposed contract. So I'll just kind of quickly go over some data here from the past 6 months. This is starting April, so this is not quite the full period. It started a little bit earlier in April, I believe, and then this is up to today. And so this is weekly ridership for the scooters in Washington. You can see, when its peak popularity here at the end of April and May, when it was brand new and people were figuring it out, and it was obviously something new that people were. It was online and on the news often, and so people were coming downtown to check them out. And you can see as the weeks have progressed, they've slowly started to plateau, and I think this is more of an average, about 450 to 500 trips per week is what we're seeing ever since this is last August. We got close to 800, but you can see here the last few weeks it has trailed off. This last week here, this is when the curfew was announced, so obviously if there's any ridership that was anything after 10 p.m., those were no longer, that option of riding at that time was no longer available. About 19,000 trips has happened in the last 6 months, about 6,500 individual riders, which is impressive, almost 30,000 miles of total distance. In Washington, it does mention the CO2 saved if that were the equal amount of miles in a gas vehicle. The average distance is actually less than a mile, so you can see people are using these. I'll show you a heat map of where we see the most average of trips, but the average trip is about 1 mile, and then the average trip is about 14 minutes is how long people are typically on one of these. So here is just a snapshot of what a week of ridership looks like. This is a week of September 11th through the 18th. I wanted to point this out, as you can see where primarily the scooters are being ridden the most. I don't have the actual numbers on the individual lines, but the darker the red, the more concentrated the ridership. So you can see Front Street and Main and primarily downtown is the heaviest red. Front Street is by far the area that is traversed the most, and then the Riverfront Trail is obviously a dark red here. For people going up and down the trail. However, they are being used to get around the north side. We'll put it north side of town. They are turned off at Highway 100, but you can see here, this is just in 1 week. Obviously some of these lines is probably just one trip. The fainter the red is probably just one trip. This does get to both high schools. Obviously we have changed it to 16 and up with a valid license, so this gets to Washington and Borgia, the fairgrounds, the riverfront, or the main park, and you can see here different neighborhoods. You can see people are probably taking them to home and to work as well. On an average day, this is what we see. So this is September 18th alone. This is a Saturday, September 18th. You can see there, I just picked a random Saturday. You can see where they primarily have been ridden. Here is Riverfront Trail. Again, the heaviest red here. The highest density is right along Front Street, is where you're seeing the most on a given Saturday. So I just wanted to show it as a snapshot of, you can see people are using them from what you can see here on Front Street. Recreational and transportation purposes, to get up and down front, but that's a pretty walkable area. So the heaviest density is like I said, in that area, but we have evidence still being used to get them around town, whether it's to home or work or for actual transportation services rather than just recreational. And again, you can see that here in these numbers with the 19,000 trips and almost 30,000 miles in just 6 months. I'll show here just a comparison to similar markets. I asked Lime, how we were comparing to other markets close to our size. As we said when they first reached out to us, this was the first time they're getting into markets of Washington size. Actually, this is, I think, we are even a little bit on the smaller side on population and scooters. We have a minimum of 60 scooters. I'm sorry, a maximum of 60 scooters. There are some festival days where there'll be maybe 70 scooters active, but are in the city limits, but they're not all active. If they're dead on a festival zone, they can cycle some in, but that is in the contract a maximum of 60 active scooters. They aren't able to share the actual data of what community this is, but I asked for a comparison. So this is a comparable market where they have a similar population and fleet size of us. And so in May, you can see this city, unnamed city, had about 1,500. We were close to 6,000. And you can see we went down in
Is that
June.
miles or rides? Is that
This
right?
is rides. This is rides. Thank you. So you can see here 1,500 in May. This comparable city, kind of stayed in here. July they were up, but even as we've trended downwards, as this has kind of become a common and not such a hot commodity of early people wanting to try them out, we still have been above the mark in comparison markets here. In August, 2,800 rides compared to 1,500 in a city with a similar 60 scooters, similar fleet and population size. So that just kind of shows that as Washington becoming and has been a destination for people in the region to come, they're utilizing these scooters to explore. It has been. I think these numbers show it's been successful in its usage for a way to explore Washington downtown and have another recreational activity available to them. So these are the terms, an overview of the terms of use that we have changed just in the last 6 months. I mentioned last month that it has been nice, and Lime has been very receptive to us making changes, whether they are on the fly or on a meeting-by-meeting basis. They have had Allison Forms is here with Lime, and she has been at every traffic committee meeting since the trial has begun. And so we have changed some of these. These are the changes we have done in the last 6 months. So the first one, we did this pretty quick when it started, amended the rideable area. So like I mentioned, it's north of Highway 100 only, no Fifth Street and no Highway 100 or 47. So you can cross 47 to get to that eastern side of town because obviously the Riverfront Trail ends over there, but you can't actually ride on the highway, you can't ride on Fifth Street. They turn off at that point, and then you can't cross 100. That was a change we made early on after they were dispersing throughout town. Scan a valid driver's license. We have implemented that to require you have to, when you're a new rider, scan a license to show that you are 16 and up and have passed that driver's test. We implemented a speed limit of 10 miles per hour on the Riverfront Trail. We did no parking on private parking or unloading areas requested by property owners. This is one I mentioned. We say we kind of do it on the fly. Private property owners are able to reach out to Lime on their own, and that has happened, I know for sure. And there's also been times where they've reached out to us and said, hey, we have, it may not be private parking, but a good example on Elm Street, right in front of the landing in the draft room there, a couple times a week, that is their delivery zone. And they use that sidewalk in the morning to roll down dollies and everything. And if there's scooters there, that was becoming an issue. So we were able to contact Lime. They put that as a no ride or no parking zone in the app, and we have not heard complaints back or any issues from those property owners. So again, that can be done through the traffic committee or from private property owners reaching out to Lime or us. No riding in festival districts. This is one we wanted to set early, but we have not only had the ones that were scheduled, but if something came up, we were able to, again, a good example was the farm to table. There was communication between Tyler King and I. Neither of us had forwarded it to Lime. The event started in 30 minutes, and we messaged Allison, and the main street was shut down within 15 minutes. And so there was a very quick, receptive changes of use that we have been able to work with Lime on. And then lastly, a change we made just last month was a recommendation from the traffic committee was to have a curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So when the bars start to let out, people are inebriated that they're not jumping on scooters and weaving in and out of traffic. So that was the most recent change we did. So there are a couple of proposed changes that you'll see in the contract. And we only have 2 listed here because, like I mentioned, they have been receptive to changing them as we go. And so there haven't really been anything we've been waiting to put off to change that would kind of defeat the purpose. The only one here is this parking corrals on Front Street only. Like I mentioned, and you can see in those heat maps that those are, since Front Street is the most traversed area, and that's where the scooters are the main area that they're picked up and put back into their areas every morning by juicers or Lime employees. We decided that our recommendation would be to, on Front Street, if anyone's riding them, especially for recreational purposes, they have to be brought back into a designated parking corral. Because it's at the end of the day, if people are picking them up from other places and taking them to Front Street, you could see on a Saturday night, especially by curfew time now, there would be the main amount. Most of our scooters, at the 60 that we have, would be up and down Front Street and then be on both sides of the sidewalk, and they'd be in different areas. This new parking corral system would require them, if you're wanting to end a ride on Front Street, to bring it back to a designated area. And I'll have some examples and of what that looks like and where they'll be. And then one thing we're going to change, this is not necessarily terms of use, but a property damage liability that was not mentioned in the original contract for cleanup. Cleaning, there has been calls about people using the skid marks and making marks on the trail or the sidewalks, and that is one thing that we had discussion with Lime that we didn't want any city staff hours or money spent on cleaning that up, and so we discussed an alternative with them on how we could get that to be fixed. And so there is a clause in there about any property damage to city sidewalks, city streets, or a trail, that we can actually hire a third party to clean that and invoice Lime directly for that. We did go out and we contacted a couple power washing companies since that was the only real complaint that we got was for that type of property damage, nothing that needed to be repaired, more just cleaned. We spoke to ServPro and JW Power Washing, the most cost effective and one that didn't have a retainer fee just for having them waiting was JW Power Washing. They have $104 an hour, and we have passed that along to Lime, and they've agreed that as needed, we will call them when we get complaints or any of our staff sees it. We can call JW Power Washing to clean that and pass that invoice to Lime.
Will that funding come out of the monthly
No.
fee that is
That is
Lime is going
separate.
to pay for that?
Yeah, that
Directly
is
from
separate.
Lime? Okay, very good, thank you.
So here are the proposed locations for the parking corrals. This is actually something that Lime put together based on data from where they see the scooters being dropped and picked up the most. And then also, these are primarily, if you're familiar with driving Front Street, especially in the morning when they are put all back into place, this is where they end up, or where they're gathered. And so these will be the parking corral stations that users actually have to put them back there. So now it won't be up to Lime staff or juicers, as they call them, to collect these in the morning or at the end of the night. These will be the users who are actually getting on the scooters and paying for them will have to put them back if they wish to end a ride on Front Street. If you're getting on one and taking it, that polygon, they call it in the app, it'll go up half the block to Main. If you're outside of that and you're wanting to get to your house or to another business or maybe go back to the high school, obviously you can park it in a safe spot like you can now, but if you're wanting to end it on Front Street, all of these are on the north side of Front Street here. And then there's 3 on the Riverfront Trail side as well. So this will kind of clean up daily the usage of scooters in those areas, and they won't be left on both sides of the sidewalk or blocking any pedestrian access on busy weekends. So just some examples of what that looks like. I took these this morning after they were collected and put back. These will be put, if I were to ride a scooter on Front Street, even if I was outside the landing, I would have to end it here in one of these spots and park it in this designated area. If I were to try to end a ride outside of that area, it would continue to charge me until I did that. You have to take a picture of it when you get off of it, and that's how you determine, yes, I'm in this polygon, here's my picture that I do it, and then it'll turn off the clock and the rate charge on the app. So there's the left and the right side. These are there's going to be 9 of them, but I just took 3 pictures. These are on the public parking north of Front Street, and then this one is on the riverfront parking lot. So the new contract terms, this is what's actually not, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the use, but the actual contract itself, which I think this first point is important, and I think vital to making this be successful here. It is a 2-year contract. I think when this first got brought up, we said, you know, the discussion was let's do a 6-month trial period and then maybe talk about a 5-year contract. We said, well, at this point, let's try a 2-year, and the most important part, and we have this now, is that it can be terminated by either party within 60-day notice. So we have that right now in our trial period, that we can pull the plug on this if there's a concern or something happens, or maybe for some reason Lime isn't being as receptive, or we can't have, you know, can't come to terms on how it's being operated. This allows us to have the wherewithal to terminate the contract and say, hey, you have 60 days to wrap this up. You know, thanks for being here, but it's not working anymore. And I think that does give us a little bit of cushion there and flexibility, that we're not signing on to something long-term without having any safeguard of ending the program. The fee of 5 cents per trip to the city, we do set that aside for our Downtown Washington Incorporated Fund that we can give to downtown to spend, you know, however they want, really. I know they have a sign and awning grant that they can put this towards, so small businesses can apply for grants for new signs, new awnings, and they also have a revolving loan fund. So they have different programs that they can go to. That does have a minimum $200 monthly, so in the winter, we have some slow months. We are still going to be getting even if it's less than 5 cents a trip, doesn't add it to 200, we would still be getting the $200 monthly. One thing we have not been doing right now is that they have a program called Lime Hero, which allows users to round up their ride. So if it's $1.85, you can round up to $2, and that 15 cents will go into that fund, which I think everyone's familiar going to the grocery store and having that question of rounding up. You know, I think more people than not would actually click yes to that, and we can switch that out as often as we want to different funds. It can go straight to Downtown Washington. The City of Washington has a United Way committee. We could have a month where it's the United Way roundup. So that is a feature we do not have currently that we have talked to Lime about of adding to the 2-year contract, which I think would be beneficial, that groups could come and petition doing a roundup for a certain amount, a service organization could for a certain amount of months, or we could do our own terms for our own groups. And then we just wanted to make clear in the contract, there's continued the flexibility of terms for special events and circumstances. So all of those, the list of terms of use that we had, they're in the contract, but we didn't want to say this is the end-all be-all. This is still a working relationship as issues come up, as festivals come up. If there's a new festival, we didn't want to just have a schedule of here the festivals are. We want to be able to still have that relationship where, hey, we have this new group petition to close Main Street for this event. Can you turn off the scooters at this time, and make sure that that is flexible for events in certain circumstances. One thing that we made clear, and actually at the downtown board meeting when they discussed their endorsement of this, and I'll get to the endorsements and reviews here, one thing was Lime so receptive and able to work with us on all of these because it was a trial period and they were being receptive, but if we get into a long-term contract, are they going to move up and focus on their next city? And so we put into the contract some language that a Lime employee or a Lime contact should be available for all the traffic committee meetings. We actually didn't specify traffic committee, any required meetings, so council meetings if as requested, or the monthly traffic meetings, so that way we can keep up that relationship and know that we have the ability to make those changes as needed. And then lastly, like I already mentioned, the cleanup fee. It is the city able to invoice Lime for third-party contracts to clean up. Again, primarily being the skid marks on the trail or sidewalks. And so, again, we have reached out to a couple companies. Sounds like right now the most affordable and the easiest would be JW Power Washing to be able to go down and clean that up under certain issues. So I think the good news here with this, in the 6 months, any complaints we've had of this, I do believe they've been a lot for the same material that hasn't, or the same skid marks that maybe haven't gotten cleaned up, and this will be something that's not a monthly fee, or it's something we get cleaned up, and we may have hopefully only have to call them once or twice a year, but it's of some peace of mind that we have that ability as needed. And so lastly, I mentioned I handed them out last month. I have copies of them, but these are just the boards that reviewed and endorsed this. And so we have, as you guys all know, made these changes over the 6 months. This is not something that just staff has said, hey, these are changes we think are a good idea. We've talked to different committees. The traffic committee has, again, had this on their agenda for 6 months, looking at complaints or changes that can be made. So it has been reviewed by the Washington Traffic Committee, the Washington Tourism Committee, Downtown Washington Core Restructuring, that is a subcommittee of Downtown Inc. that is not only downtown board members, but business owners and volunteers that focus on viability and restructuring, redevelopment of downtown. And then also the Downtown Washington Inc. Board. I gave you that letter last month as well of endorsing the transportation method for Lime scooters in the downtown. And that is all I have. The last thing I'll wrap up with before I open for questions, and like I mentioned, Allison is here from Lime to answer questions. We have been, continuing to let the public know and let people know that they could forward complaints to our traffic committee. In the last 2 months, we have gotten 0. So it got brought up at the last meeting, that maybe there were some complaints that weren't getting forwarded along. It was said that, to send it over to the traffic committee. We had one this last Friday. And Officer Grissom mentioned that he had not gotten any complaints again, so that's 2 months in a row. I think, as you can see in that usage, that over the last 6 months, going from 1,500 weekly down to 400, the usage isn't, it's going to top off. It's not going to be a brand new thing that people are getting used to. That now I think it has kind of found its legs here. So that's all I have for tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions now. This is on the agenda later tonight as well for the 2-year contract.
Sal, where would you report damages? Would you call the police, or would it be like if you like to have it cleaned up like pretty quick? Who would you call?
So to the traffic committee, same place, for cleanups. All of these can funnel through Officer Grissom, who coordinates
Officer Grissom.
Officer Grissom, who coordinates through our traffic committee. That way, it doesn't get lost in the shuffle if it went to the wrong department, and that it automatically goes through there. Obviously, if it's private property damage, just like any other, a cyclist could run into a building or something, that is different. That would be between Lime and the property owner. But if it's public property vandalism, the skid marks, that kind of thing can be reported to the traffic committee. Officer Grissom has a spreadsheet of all complaints, and if it's been addressed or if it's something that needs to be addressed by Lime, we track that.
So if I have something at church, which I had, and I cleaned it up, should I have called traffic committee like in the future?
Correct, yes.
Future, yes.
Okay.
We didn't have this for the first
Yeah,
6
I
months, 'cause
understand.
We didn't
I'm-
realize what an issue it could be.
I just
So if you had something on your personal driveway, though, you could still call?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
so anything.
Yeah, any complaint can still be forwarded on, and then, as we know, it's all reviewed by Line. That will send this invoice to them, but they have been receptive that they'll be willing to work with us on cleanup. That some of the skid marks, it's very obvious from what it can come from, the tire shape and size and everything. So
The speed limit on the trail is reduced to 10 miles an hour. What is it elsewhere in town?
that's the only area we have a speed limit.
What is their top speed of their scooters?
Oh, 15 miles an hour.
Sal, let me run something by you here. Before we sign a contract for 2 years with Allison and her company, since downtown Washington's the ones that are benefit from this, 200 plus, they can get 200 plus a month out of this, right?
Correct.
So minimum $2,400 a month.
A year.
I feel that downtown Washington needs to throw something into this project here. And me personally, I would rather see downtown Washington take this whole project over, contract over, and they can still be on the traffic committee meetings every month. But why does the city of Washington have to be in it when they're benefited from it?
Well, it's not something they can contract with because it's on public property. The contract is for them to place them and operate them on city streets and have them parked on sidewalks and actually operate here.
And also to be the sole provider,
Yeah,
so that you don't have another company that comes in at once. I mean, that's part of what the contract.
Well, we can control that, though.
Huh?
We can control that.
You can control that, but I'm saying that's the reason why they're contracting with you is due to the fact that they want to be the sole provider for those I don't know that we would want to entertain another one anyway, necessarily. But the idea is that's the reason why you would, is that we would just be the only ones that you contract. Could downtown Washington do that?
There's nothing for
I
Downtown
don't know.
Washington Inc. to have a contract with, because they don't have the ability to give permission for any of this.
We can't give them permission to do this?
That came up over the trial period, and I remember Mark mentioned that they can't ask for that. This is not something that they can give a contract for.
And I guess what what could be a problem is that if you gave it to them to go ahead, is that then how would you be able to go ahead and place restrictions that you want within the city? Like hours of operation and
Through
those
the
other
traffic committee?
things? Well, then you're still regulating it, though.
Well, we regulate laws anyway.
Yeah. I don't necessarily see the benefit to passing it, well, and I don't know if you can too, because, I mean, it's,
I would
Another
like
service
to
that
get
already
Mark's
works.
comments, Mark Piontek's comments on that and see if that's something that would be.
I'm just saying, they're the ones benefit from it, and we're doing all the work for nothing.
well, I think that's the point, that we're not necessarily doing all the work, because we're passing any cleanup, there's no man hours, there's no
What are we doing?
city dollars going towards this.
I didn't say there was.
Yeah.
Saying we're doing the work for them, signing the contract, writing them the $200+ checks a month. I just don't understand why we can't have them. I mean, maybe we need to talk to Mark about it before we sign this contract.
Well, Mark will be here at our next meeting, so you can ask him
I'm
when
just
it
throwing
comes
it out
up
there
on the
for somebody to
agenda.
think about.
All right,
You can ask him
I
when
don't know
it
if it'll
comes up.
work,
okay.
But they'll have something in the game too then.
Would we still be doing a lot of the work, though? You're saying they should still refer everything to the traffic committee. That's Washington staff. So they would still be doing a lot of the work.
Yeah, but Sal's not running around taking pictures, answering this, doing that.
Do you do that a lot, Sal?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Mark said you're not running around taking pictures and doing this and doing that
Well,
for
who took the
this.
pictures this morning?
I mean, yeah, I did
Well,
that.
Sal did, but I don't
Well-
know if he's showing us pictures every week.
I think that was his due diligence and preparation
Just using as
for
an
coming
example.
here
Steve
today.
said we got city staff people working. Well, we did, right there. There's one example.
Yeah, I mean, I
Pictures.
prepared this PowerPoint, yeah, you're right.
I also, and I brought this up last time we started talking about this. And Sal, I don't know how much square footage or miles, whatever, we added to this proposed new downtown district. But kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Sontrup, and, this downtown is making all the money on this. Not that there's a lot to be made, but they are getting the money on this. And you even said a couple times in your presentation that the majority of it gets ridden downtown. I make a recommendation that we just keep them downtown, keep them in the proposed new downtown district that we have right here, and keep them away from everybody else, their headaches. If that's where the majority they're getting ridden anyway, downtown's getting the money, keep them downtown.
And what headaches are those again, Mark? Because I think they said they haven't had any complaints in the last
We have
2
one
months.
complaint last meeting. A gentleman came up to the podium.
Certainly, I remember that. I'm just curious if they're
So, I mean,
formal.
I don't think all the complaints are getting documented or we're getting told about it, Gretchen. I mean, that's, I know my phone rings, people complain. I do know that.
We
Surely.
have officers on the street that people can talk to. We have communications that people can talk to. We have our traffic meeting, and we have Mike's number. 2 months, we received no complaints.
And by the way, when you say traffic committee, call the traffic committee, I've never seen a number anywhere that
That goes to Mike's phone.
strictly for traffic committee. I've
Goes
never
to
seen
Mike.
that number out
It
there.
goes to Mike's phone.
So how
And
do we
at
get
one
that out?
point, we did have it
I
posted.
think Mike gave the number out at a
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah, it was published in the newspaper also.
It was in the newspaper?
And if you have downtown Washington do it, you're still gonna have the traffic committee involved because they cannot enforce the law. They cannot make changes in how things are done on a street because it's a public street. That's up to ordinance and the police department and council.
Is that on our city website, that number for the traffic?
I'd have to check now, but at one point it was posted and the newspaper I know listed it.
Not everybody reads, never everybody gets the
I understand.
newspaper as we see. So,
But people
I
have,
think it needs to be on our website.
but, I mean, people have many opportunities to complain. But in the past 2 months, we have received no complaints. other than a complaint from last council meeting.
I just wanted to make that known so we could ask Mark on, you know, whether or not we could do that.
Sure.
I mean, a recommendation, I'm just bringing it up. I mean,
And you still have the.
downtown Washington has a lot of events downtown. A lot of people use the scooters downtown, and I just thought maybe if they're going to be benefit from it, maybe that they ought to be the ones running it. That's all I'm saying.
Allison, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
You'll have the festival districts, and the fire and police like to keep control of that, so that we can say we don't want scooters running around, and then we enforce that. The downtown Washington wouldn't enforce that. They wouldn't be able to. That's up to us to do that. So I agree they benefit from it the most, but to have them take it over totally would be, you couldn't do that.
We got a lot of areas around the rest of our town that don't want them either, though. And we're sitting
But
saying,
if you
well,
look
I haven't
at-
heard any complaints.
Right, and look at the graph though, where do they go? The hospital, the trail, the schools, and then the fairgrounds. I mean, that's not, nothing over 100, nothing on Fifth Street. Of course, you haven't had Bush Trail yet in, so you have to make a determination for the Bush Trail of how that's gonna go. That won't be downtown Washington, because that's not in the downtown district. But people will want to be able to ride them on Bush Trail.
How are we getting on the south side of Fifth Street if they're not allowed on Fifth Street?
They can cross it,
Cross.
but they cannot
You
drive
can't
on
go
it.
down Fifth Street.
Yeah, they can't go
You
east
use
or
that as a
west.
route, but you can cross it.
They can
I think
cross
even when you cross it, does it, it turns off and then you gotta manually power it till you get to the side?
And I was skeptical about Lime scooters and how they would operate. We've done ordinances to prevent on sidewalks and follow the law and parking, and that's what we need to do. That's enforcement issues that we need to take care of as a police department for the city and the city council.
Allison, are most of your contracts with cities? Can you come
Can you
up
come to
kinda
the-
to the podium and give us your name?
Hi, everyone. Allison Forms, Lime. As far as I know, everything has been with the cities because usually the ordinance are passed through the cities, and then we sign contracts based on the ordinance.
Okay.
Would you object to being in another contract with another company, like downtown Washington?
I would object just because I like to be the only, the sole provider, but that's completely your decision, and that's something you could do.
It's just worth, I'd like to talk to Mark about it and just find
Oh,
out.
he'll be at the next meeting, so.
Okay, thanks.
I think the only thing we see when you have multiple providers is things get messy, is what I would say.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I guess, do we need to accept this into the minutes, or
It's just for discussion.
just for discussion? Okay,
Thank you.
all right. I need to open this up.
Report of department heads, Engineering Department, Ameren overhang easement.
Good evening, council. Within your council packet, there is an easement for an Ameren, basically it allows Ameren to overhang their utilities onto a parcel of property that the city owns. It's the old historic firehouse. It's at Fifth and Stafford. Ameren's doing a pole replacement project through that corridor down to Front Street. It's actually already ongoing. If you've been up there, they've had some street closures and whatnot going on. But basically, they came to us, they wanted a 25-foot easement that would allow them to place poles and other things within that 25-foot. Working with Ameren, I was concerned about that for the future of that property, and were able to reduce that to 15-foot. And then there's some language explicitly stating they could not put any appurtenances, poles, guy wires, those type of things within that easement. The concern there was we didn't want to give up any property rights so we could use that in the future. All this is, it's an overhang easement, allows access to the power poles. The poles will still be in the sidewalks. And we're working with them on trying to preserve as much ADA compliance as possible. Unfortunately, Stafford Street is not ADA compliant just due to the right-of-way width that we have. We do believe it does allow for wheelchair accessibility. It just doesn't meet the 48 inches required by ADA. So that easement would be, we are the grantors of that. The grantee is Ameren. So if you have any questions.
John, is that meant, okay, so when they finish the work, the easement ends?
No.
No,
It's
this
in
is not-
perpet- it's
this
in
is not a
perpetuity.
temporary construction easement, this is not that.
It's in perpetuity.
Okay, I'm just not sure I understand what.
So what it allows,
For.
so the lines themselves, the power poles, the power lines themselves have, they don't call them alley arms, I can't think of the Ameren term, but there's the arms that hold the poles up.
Crossbar.
Those actually, there you go, they actually extend over top of your property line. Easements run vertical in space as well, so your property line's hard here, those lines will overhang that. That's all it really is.
So they don't now, but they will?
They do now, and they will in the future, if you pass
They
this
do
ordinance.
now, they already have the easement.
They don't, no. They're just,
have the
they're,
They've never received an easement?
correct,
Oh, so they're going back.
correct.
All right,
But
okay.
it's a cleanup item,
I got you.
essentially.
So is that just the only area in town that doesn't have an easement, or do
Oh,
we
no,
have a
they're
lot of
all over.
areas that are
They're all over the place.
all over the place? Okay, something that just slipped through the cracks?
Well, I mean, you could imagine putting power poles up. I mean,
Yeah.
we did an encroachment with the Bank of Franklin County because there was a water line put outside the easement. So things happen during construction over, 80 years. You're going to have these things. So now's the time to clean it up.
Okay.
And like I said, they can't put poles or any appurtenances or things within that easement, which is probably the most important part.
Okay, so any questions or comments?
Need to move on to council.
Make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Holtmeyer to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, you've moved it on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have anything
Is
else?
there another agenda item? Nope. Real quick update, on your council packet, there's actually a change order number 1 for the 4th and Fair Street project. Gershenson Construction is the contracting company that's doing the work. They had a completion date of November 5th to complete that project.
What address again?
Sorry, what?
Say Fourth and,
4th and Fair,
oh,
Fair Street.
Yeah. We
Fair
were
Street's-
doing
it's
something
already
here on 4th Street.
Sidewalk, and then there's the 4th from here on over to
to
Cedar.
Cedar Street.
oh, okay.
It was,
I was
it was approved a month and a half ago. Yeah, it's a fairly large project, but the completion date was November 5th. And we've been working with Gershenson to get into town and get to working because that was their schedule to hit. Notice to proceed was issued on August 17th. The actual start date wasn't until September 28th. They lost, significant amount of time there. So there's not, the contract has various options of what we could do, or we could enforce. Liquidated damages is obviously one of them. That's set per contract at $950 a day if they don't meet that deadline. The project at the time did not start, so they are currently there now. They've been there since Tuesday of last week. But at the time when this was drafted, we could have canceled the contract, rebid the job, would have been one thing we could have done. I do not recommend doing that. I think prices would have soared and you still wouldn't have the project done by wintertime this year. So what this change order does, it's a no-cost change order, but it basically splits the project up into 2 phases. Phase 1, which will have a completion date of November 25th, which is Fair Street. If you recall, Fair Street was, your property owners all got together, they wanted the sidewalk, they signed the easements and things, and it was a very kind of coming together, I guess, of that community. So I'd like to get that done this year, just to kind of get that checked off the list. And then the Phase 2 would be completed by April 15th of 2022. And then there's also verbiage in the change order that said that they cannot, or after November 25th, they cannot have any open excavations longer than 7 days. So what my concern was is that they would still continue, let's just say December's warm, they would continue to work here on 4th Street. Weather would get bad, then you'd have open excavations for weeks on end. So this kind of phases that out. It keeps them going at kind of small chunks if they so choose to work through wintertime. November 15th would then allow them to pave the job out as soon as the asphalt plant opens up. What we get out of this is, again, there's no dollars changed. We then are increasing the liquidated damage potential. Again, I'm not charging anything, this proposal, the potential from $950 to $1,500 a day. So again, I'm trying to get this project moving and not try to throw everybody off the job and not get something done this year. I want to proceed. We got a good price, but I'm also trying to give them a little bit of another nudge to get this thing done and hit this new schedule that we say they're going to hit. That's what change order number 1 does. Again, no dollars, no change to the actual what's getting constructed, but it is a contractual change order to get things moving as fast as we can. Honestly, I think that's the best solution we have for the situation we're in.
Are you expecting the asphalt plants to stay open in November?
Yes. They are right now, their current schedule is to have Fair Street completed the week before Thanksgiving and then pave it out before Thanksgiving. So Fair Street only. Then the other portion would then be November 15th. They would have winter to work on the concrete portion and then pave that out next spring.
Why did they get started so late?
How many excuses would you like? I've heard COVID, I've heard skilled labor shortage, I've heard completion of other projects, I've heard everything. I've told them, you bid the job, not us, is what my response was. But again, they're not gonna have 100% completion, so, by winter time. So I'm just trying to get whatever we can get done.
Can't we make a proposal, a recommendation that they get Saturdays in there too? Push them to
They are.
work overtime.
No, Saturdays is in it. It's a hard completion date. So there's 24 hours in a day. I mean,
Didn't know they were doing Saturdays.
they have the ability to. Whether they choose to is not my call, but it's theirs.
Can't you push for that? When I'm on projects and I have a deadline,
It's not mine to push.
we gotta do it. We gotta do it to make it happen.
It's their contract.
I think your
I
push
don't-
is.
I don't run their
what's your
construction
completion
company.
date that you want them to get it done, and then how they get it done is up to them. So. if-
Now, again, your
under
other
this, you're talking November 25th, correct?
Correct, it was pushed out. Now, the other option is you hold on, you don't approve the change order, and then they gotta get in by November 5th, and you charge them liquidated damages, and then the project doesn't get done through winter time, those things. Now, they will get weather delays, if there was, those are all part of the contract, but those are really what the options are, and I'm trying to meet in the middle of the.
Something that you're going to throw at them or something that you're going to?
We've discussed.
What's that?
He's discussed.
This has been discussed, yes. And I've invited them to come to this meeting to,
They
essentially.
okay with it?
They are very amenable to this. And again, staff's goal was to get Fair Street done because I think that's where you saw the most people coming together.
Yes.
And my concern with 4th Street was we don't want to have this tore up all winter long. That's my worry.
I think it's a good idea.
I would also add, with the sales tax, or I'm sorry, the motor vehicle fuel tax going into effect October 1st, and the amount of work that there's proposed coming down the pipelines, we're going to have a shortage of skilled labor and other things that we are going to have to think a little bit outside the box on how we get these things completed. And I don't mean that to scare. I could see it coming, basically, that there's just going to be so much work and not enough labor to get the projects on the ground. So obviously, supply and demand, your prices are going to go up, and I'm afraid some of these schedules, we're going to have to be a little amenable to them. Just unfortunate. Or fortunate, however you look at it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And last, High Street is 98% completed, just waiting on MoDOT inspection. I thought we had minor complaints throughout the project, traffic control, normal things, but I had a lot of complaints from the residents along there, just how it turned out. I thought it turned out very well. And, that was first project that we've done with that contractor, so.
They were also very cooperative and responsive, and you might have been the liaison with the school.
Yes,
So just wanted
we
to make
were.
sure whoever needed to be recognized.
Andrea, city staff was very, very responsive with the school, and the school was also very receptive to information as it was coming, so thank you for that.
Anything else?
All right, thank you.
Parks Department, Phoenix Park Playground.
Good evening, council. In your packet tonight, you'll find a letter about the Phoenix Park Playground. which is in the half-cent sales tax. It was one of the projects that was bumped up this year. It is a, excuse me, a very worthy project to be bumped up. The closest playground to Phoenix Park right now is Optimus Park. And if you've been over there, that playground's a little dated. And so this will be a good project. We found a nice layout for it next to the pavilion up there by the tennis courts, a set of 4 tennis courts, and it'll fit in nice there. Like I said, this was budgeted in the half-cent sales tax budget. The price is $243,756. That includes installation, excuse me, installation of the equipment, and then engineered wood fiber as a surfacing, and then freight. And so this one will be a little bit different than the one we did at Main Park. It won't have the rubberized surfacing. It'll have what they call engineered wood fiber. So it'll look like mulch. In a way, it is mulch, but it's compacts real easily, and it's ADA accessible. So, and we will have a fence around that playground. And then we have to do a little shifting, a small section of the asphalt trail that comes around that upper detention pond will shift over a little bit towards the parking lot. And it'll kind of dead end, it kind of dead ends right now into that shelter. It'll still dead end into that shelter and the entrance of the playground. And so this was approved. Park Board made their recommendation a couple weeks ago at their meeting, and so I have it here for your approval tonight.
Are there any questions or comments?
Are you gonna try to build that before winter, or?
Yes. Well, not, it just depends. No, actually, no, I take that back. She told me.
Lead time on it?
Yeah, lead time. The soonest it would be here, and that was if we signed it, I think, a couple weeks ago. As soon as it would be here would be January.
Oh.
But we would start doing we have parks, we'll have to do some site grading and things like that, so. And we could do that fairly soon.
Thank you very much. Ward 2's happy.
Do we need a motion to send this to council?
We do.
I sure will.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Solentrup, seconded by Hydrich, to send this on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Or your vote?
Well, we're talking about Phoenix Park. I know nothing about it, but I want to know something about it. But I've been not getting a lot of calls, but I had several people had talked to me about pickleball at Phoenix Park. And I'm tired of hearing about it, and they say that you're not responding to them. So tell me what the problem is with the pickleball at Phoenix Park.
Well, I haven't had a direct call in, it's probably since probably about this time last
Good,
fall.
because they're on that little camera up there.
I've had people like yourself approach me about it, but no one directly from the organization. But we haven't done anything. I think last time you and I talked, it was right around the opening of the pool. I kind of wanted to see how that all played out, and I think I was just telling Darren the other day that other than you saying something to me in May, I hadn't heard anything since late last fall. So I thought.
What is
everything had-
pickleball? I don't know.
Well, it's like a form of, I guess, tennis, almost with like a wiffle ball, and it's a smaller court. And you can, we have 2 courts out there already on the set of 4.
Yeah.
The 2 western courts, so what we call 3 and 4, have lines on them. And so it's easier anyone can play it. I've played it with my kids and my family. It's a little bit easier in tennis, and so it's easier for older adults to play.
That's the ones asking.
Yeah. Last year during the pandemic, I don't know if it was during the height, but late spring, early summer, they had a temporary court drawn on the asphalt slab up at the fairgrounds across from the old tennis courts up there, across from the bathrooms. That empty asphalt slab, they had taped it off and they asked us ahead of time, taped it off for pickleball up there. But all of a sudden they stopped using it. I don't know exactly why. But then that's when they were wanting more courts on the tennis courts. And so.
Would it hurt to put the pickleball on the asphalt or whatever it is, to paint it on there? And then what I hear is they say, you're not allowed to play on this court. And they're out there wanting to play, but they can't play because it says you can't play on this court. So why, would it hurt to just paint the pickleball stripes on the court? And a person wants to use it for pickleball, they can. If they want to use it for tennis, they can. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's how 3 and 4 are set up now. It's just, it all depends how many people are there wanting to play tennis and how many people are wanting to play pickleball.
There's your rub right there.
Yeah,
Between the tennis players and the pickleball players.
But if two of them are already taken and they can't play on the other one because it's not marked, I mean, what's wrong with marking all 4 of them for pickleball and tennis both?
We can mark them for all, I mean, we can certainly do that, and it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not
I
too,
don't know anything
too
about
expensive.
pickleball, and I just-
As long as everyone will agree to, last year when this came up in the, I guess in the media, there was letters to the editor and all kinds of, and so that's what I'm trying to avoid. I want to make sure everyone plays nice over there, and so I don't get a bunch of calls. See, that's what I'm talking about.
There you have it.
Yeah, there were some,
It's
there
the
was
fight
some.
between the pickle and the.
That's exactly.
It is, the pickle and the
You may or
tennis.
may not want to be involved, Steve.
Well,
That's all I'm
That's
saying.
why I said, I will bring it up. That's all I said.
All right, well, you-
Tennis ball's got a bigger
So
racket.
I'm gonna eat my pickle when I get home. Thank you.
Wayne, one
Yes.
more thing with Phoenix Park. So I'm getting some calls. I'm getting some calls about the lights aren't on the parking lot and on the, let me see here, what I got. Lights on the drive into Phoenix Park and not on the parking lot lights are not on.
Yeah,
We know-
I just found out about that, I guess, late last week sometime last week, and Chad and I were discussing it today, and after doing some investigation, the wiring went bad, and we think, John, do you remember who was over there in the spring that was doing utility work? What was it? Can't remember. Yes, gas company was boring over there, and I think they may have messed with some of the line. I think it may be a byproduct of some of the work they were doing over there. It didn't happen right away after they were gone, but we think that maybe some of the wires. We had we had a local company out there looking at it last week, and that's what they determined. So it's going to be we can get it fixed, but it's going to take a little bit of time. So.
They claim they called 3 weeks ago and nobody's returned any calls out of the engineering and building department. And then they said they called the Parks Department and Parks
Yeah.
Department told them that they don't mess with that. So I decided to
I
ask.
don't know I know we took the call. I heard the call come in. I know that was not said. But yeah, that's when but I wasn't, prior to that, I wasn't aware of it, so that's when we checked it out. So again, if people don't call and tell us, they can put all they want on Facebook, but I'm not checking, I don't go to all the sites to check out what's going on Facebook, so. But yeah, we're working on it.
Thank you.
okay. Anything else, Wayne?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So just to follow up, the question about Mike Grissom's phone number. Okay, so Sherry looked it up, and on our website is the Lime scooter number and an email are on our website for support. So I suppose are you getting anything, or?
I've only had, actually, I think, one, that was to create a zone around a certain area, but I haven't heard of any other type of complaints.
Okay, all right. And then the Traffic Commission number is not on the website. However, Sherry says that we can definitely add it, and I think you're the person who does that, right? So should we put that, how should we list that, Chief?
Well, that number would go to Mike Grissom also.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yes.
put Mike's number
So we'll
on
put Mike's number on there, so, okay?
And then we do have a spreadsheet of the calls and complaints we've received that Mike has kept
Okay,
that we can make available.
all right. So just for clarification, it wasn't, she didn't see it on there, but we will add it now. Okay? All right. And then, should we talk to Mark about?
I think we can do that at,
Okay,
when it
we-
comes
we
up for
have
the
a question
ordinance.
for you in the
Yeah.
next meeting. Okay.
But I guess one other item I would like to bring up, but I'll go ahead and do it under city administrator's report in the next meeting, but it has to do with drafting an ordinance for street closures and that process. And so we're just looking for some guidance from council, but I'll give you more details at the next meeting.
Okay, is there anything else?
Well,
Yes,
just kind of clarify on these tennis courts, we could paint them for pickleball, but are we going to or not?
We can, and I will look into it. I'm fine with it as long as everyone can play nice, and I don't get calls about it. Because it's like dealing with 10-year-olds. but,
Two different sports.
Yes. But, yeah, we can definitely look into it, and I can pursue that.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Solentrub, seconded by Holtmeyer to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, we are adjourned. Thank you. Ready? Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, please.
Regular meeting of Washington, Missouri City Council, Monday, October 4th, 2021, 7 p.m. Heidrich.
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Patke.
Here.
Pettit.
Here.
Reed.
Yep.
Scornia.
Here.
Solentrup. Wessels. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will all the council members answer if they have or have not read the minutes of the council meeting dated September 20th, 2021? Heidrich.
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Patke.
Yes.
Pettit.
Aye.
Reed.
Yep.
Scornia. Solentrup. Wessels.
Having read the minutes, are there any comments or questions?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Heidrich, seconded by Patke, to approve the minutes from our last meeting dated September 20, 2021. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the minutes. Thank you.
Approval and adjustment of agenda, including consent agenda. You have the collector's report summary, June 2021, investment report summary, June 2021, change order number 1, 2021 4th Street and Fair Street Overlay Project, final payment request for Heritage Park Sidewalk Project, final payment request for Public Works Facility Roof Project.
Okay, are there any comments or questions about any of the items on the consent agenda?
I would just remind the council that the third item that Sherry listed there was what John explained in the previous meeting and the new schedule that would be done for 4th and Fair Street.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Heidrich, seconded by Holtmeyer, to approve the minutes on the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the items. Thank you.
Public hearings, rezoning of 86 properties into the C3 Downtown Commercial District.
Okay, Sal?
Which one is it?
All right, good evening again. So this is a little bit of a different request tonight. This is a rezoning that has actually been proposed by city staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is something that has actually been reviewed for 4 months now. It has been on the past 4 Planning and Zoning Commission agendas to review, revise, look at different options of how we could achieve this. But just a little bit of background here. This is something that has kind of been on our mind for a number of years. That in reality for our C3, and just a refresher, our C3 district is our central business district that is designed and written, and the intent and purpose of that is for our downtown zoning that allows for zero lot line, mixed use of residential and commercial, and then no parking regulations. The main reason for that parking regulation is that in an historic district, if you require someone to have off-street parking for their business and they're at a zero lot line, the really only option is to buy a property, which is probably another historic structure, tear it down to put it more surface parking. And so in our downtown district, we primarily rely on on-street and public parking anyway, so that has been the main reason for requiring that, or allowing for no parking requirements. And then in reviewing our downtown district, for a long time it has not really been compact and contiguous. It has not been orderly with actually having a boundary. We had a core area that was allowed, that was zone C3 back in '89. I think it was '89 when we had our original zoning code. And then over the years there's been a couple of requests either approved or denied for C3 outside of that, but then they're not contiguous with the existing boundaries. So the Planning and Zoning Commission in one of our meetings months ago asked me to come up with a possible solution to creating an actual growth boundary in downtown district for this. And we looked at possibility of doing an overlay district on top of that, on top of our existing C3, or just doing a rezoning. And we came down to the conclusion that the easiest way and the cleanest way to do this was to actually define a growth boundary in an area that we consider to be downtown, and then rezone any property in that boundary that is not currently C3 to C3. So why the district revision expansion? I'll kind of go through a checklist here of of why we did this and how this came about at the Planning and Zoning Commission, like I said, about 4 months ago. And the first main reason was to create an organized and orderly downtown district. Like I said, it was not defined by any boundaries in our code. It was just whatever was existing C3, that was considered downtown, but didn't actually have a real definition and an orderly district of where downtown began and ended. We wanted to encompass existing island or spot zoning cases to make them contingent with compatible zoning. Like I mentioned, we have a couple circumstances where over a decade ago or longer, someone requested C3 zoning. It was approved, but it was kind of an island on its own. It's not contiguous to any other C3 zoning. And then when we would have someone request C3, they're not contiguous with downtown zoning, so we would say, well, that's not an appropriate use. You're a block or two removed. Well, we didn't have any leg to stand on because we had done it in the past. So this would clean up and say, nope, this is the defined growth boundary of what downtown is. I would bring properties that are suitable for redevelopment into the correct zoning, removing development hurdles. As you'll see and as I'll show you on some maps here, we definitely have some areas that I think everyone in this room could agree is considered downtown. That is prime for the possibility of redevelopment for a type of zero lot line mixed use development that would fit there, but it's not currently zoned for that. If someone were to come in and ask to do the same thing that you would see on Lafayette or Jefferson Street or Main on one of these properties, we would tell them, no, you'd have to go through rezoning and a variance, and then in that case, you may end up having a property that we think is suitable for redevelopment, but it's not contiguous to existing C3, so we would be inclined to recommend denial of it just because it's not touching an existing district, and that really isn't the best way to handle a redevelopment, especially when we think the proposed development is appropriate, but just because it's not touching a color on a map, we would have to recommend denial of it. Remove the possibility of future industrial uses that are no longer compatible with our downtown. This is one, I mean, again, with our zoning was created for existing uses or historic uses. You go up and down Front Street or even up onto Main, there's some areas that, yeah, there was a concrete plant there at one time. There's some other factory uses that are no longer there, but that zoning still exists. And in reality, that zoning was put into place to make sure those industrial uses that need to be on the river or in that area for that time, it allowed it. But now, as you've seen how downtown has evolved over the past 20, 30 years, those uses aren't really compatible, but for some reason, there's some islands of those zoning that are still there. The uses that are there currently are either grandfathered in or have been vacant, and there's, if someone wanted to redevelop them and bring it into and do a downtown type use, a mixed use, they would have to come for a rezoning, or you have to ask yourself the question on the other side, some of these vacant properties are still industrial. Do we really think bringing industrial use back in is still appropriate for how downtown has evolved? And then lastly, I've mentioned this a couple times now, designate an actual growth boundary for downtown. Officially define it in our code. Again, this comes up, if it's not defined in our code, how are you going to stop someone or any property owner, say out on the highway 147, and saying, I want to request C3 zoning there so I could have apartments above of retail. We say, no, that's for our downtown district. Well, it doesn't actually say anywhere in our code that it needs to be part of our historic downtown. It mentions historic nature, but it doesn't actually say anything of a physical area defined by streets of where this district is. And so we thought, in discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission, what would be a way to fix a lot of these, address a lot of these issues would be to rezone properties that aren't currently in the downtown district and bring them in, and then actually have a code amendment to the definition of C3 to define a base area, what we'll call a growth boundary. So there's some areas in here that aren't necessarily developed yet, but we see naturally becoming developed over the coming years, decades, and defining that in our code book. So what does this mean for property owners? I think this is the most important thing to point out and to hone in on, because this, again, is something that the Planning and Zoning Commission is facilitating this rezoning. That is very rare. Typically, we don't rezone any property until it is requested by the property owners. In this case, it is us requesting to rezone property owners. And so we sent 89 letters out a couple times to property owners, let them know about these meetings. So it's not like we're springing this on anyone, but we have had conversations with them at Planning and Zoning Commission, and these are the main topics that came up, and we just wanted to make clear to all of them. So what does this mean for them? It does allow for the zero lot line development, so many lots in this area are unusually small. As the lots have developed or been created over the decades, a lot of these historic lots are extremely small in nature, and they wouldn't even be able to meet natural setbacks that we have in any of our zone districts. So a lot of them are already non-conforming. They have 0 lot lines, even though their current zone district wouldn't allow it. This would make those all conforming and make future development easier on these properties. It removes requirement for off-street parking in all these properties. So again, because of the lot size, current zoning would require them to purchase additional land, possibly tear down adjacent structures for parking. This allows them to not have any requirements for off-street parking and to utilize on-street and public parking in the district in lieu of providing their own parking. A big one here, we wanted to make clear to all these property owners that there is no action required. Because we are rezoning you, that does not require the property owner to change any current use. If they are doing anything that isn't currently used or permitted in C3, it will automatically become grandfathered. I can only think of 2 right now. It's the Corncob Pipe Factory and the blacksmiths, the
Blackman's.
Blackman's, thank you, sorry. Those are the 2 industrial uses that would be into C3, continue to be used there. No, there's not going to be any change required for that. All uses, current uses are permitted in C3 will be grandfathered in. And that also goes for when they're wanting to actually sell and redevelop at some point. That, again, tears down some of those hurdles where these now mixed-use, 0 lot line zoning requirements are already in place that they can easier redevelop. And lastly, it does not change the property taxes. I think that was the biggest question we got up. If it is used residentially right now, and they see that C3, that central business district, they say, am I going to be assessed commercially now? And the answer is a flat out no. Property taxes are assessed by the county by use, not by zoning. So just because you are in the C3 zoning does not mean you are going to be commercially assessed, and that happens all over our downtown district. The assessor comes in every other year and assesses property by use and not by the zoning, so there's not a concern there either. So now to get into actually the...
Hey, Sal, can I just ask a question just on that? Is there any scenario where it would be detrimental to a previous landowner to switch to C3? I mean, is it, as far as limitations go or anything like that, like you said, they're going to be grandfathered in, but is there any situation, any scenario where I'm operating a bed and breakfast, or I'm operating, my house is there, what's the changes, and it would be detrimental in any way?
Well, I mean, not for those examples, no, because C3 allows for the bed and breakfast.
Right.
And allows additional retail, office, apartments, all that mixed into one property. There are, and I'll show on the zoning maps, a couple of properties that are zoned industrial, that there are more uses permitted currently in industrial than there are in C3. But I think that's where you get down to the discussion is that are the industrial uses still suitable for that? And so there are, in some circumstances, some properties where you're taking away uses that are currently allowed in light industrial. But on 95%, 98% of these properties, they are already in C2 overlay, they're in R1B, they're in multifamily, and bringing them into C3 actually just allows more uses for them.
And I think I can elaborate a little bit, Jeff. If, for example, Sal mentioned 2 uses that he knows of that would be grandfathered in, Blackman's and the Corncob Pipe Factory. If Blackman's wanted to, for example, I'm going to use them because there's not a lot of room down there for the Corncob Pipe Factory, but Blackman's have got a little bit of room. If they were zone C3 and they wanted to do an expansion, I don't know if it would require a special use permit or if it would be prohibited under C3 zoning.
For an expansion of that use?
If it was zone C3.
If it was zone C3, they would be required to get a...
Is it allowed by special use permit?
Yes, it is. All right, yes.
That's my question,
Yes.
or whatever. Just answer his. Right now, if it's zoned industrial, they could go ahead and do that expansion by right. If it's under this plan, they would have to come to you for a special use permit. So there's answering your question, what detriment is it to anybody?
Right, that's kind of what I'm getting at, and that's a good example. I mean, Blackman's have been here for
Correct.
Right.
well over 100 years, and now we're going to make them jump through loops if they want to add on to their building. I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
If they wanted to do that, that would be correct. I don't know that that.
But it wouldn't be that they strictly prohibited that they couldn't do it.
I don't remember.
All right, so here is the existing non-contiguous C3 district that I mentioned. So everything highlighted here is currently in the C3 zoning that is considered downtown. And then when I mentioned a couple spot zoning outliers, we have a property here that is on Fifth Street, that is zone C3. That was actually one that is a good example. They wanted to do an industrial use that wasn't allowed in C2. It was tire disposal. They got rezoned to C3 and then asked for a special use permit. So that is how that process happened. But that is what was approved. Again, an outlier from our district, and it's not contiguous with an existing district. So if someone were to come with that request today, staff would most likely recommend denial of that. Rhine River, a good example of a redevelopment that was part of a redevelopment plan. 353 was a part of that and encouraged, but again, it's separated from the C3 district. So it kind of creates this disorderly district here in our existing C3 downtown. And again, here is our current zoning code across the board. And so you have this, starting on this western side, here's Rhine River, currently in the downtown district, but not contiguous with anything. You have this corner here, which is C1, light commercial, allows for office and general retail, but not technically any residential uses. And then this gray here, the rest of the block, Bleckman's, Tibby Power, and the Corncob Pipe Factory are all still in this industrial zoning. This yellow you have here is single-family residential. This here, this dark blue is all considered C2 overlay, which allows for single-family, two-family, and then commercial uses, but doesn't allow for multifamily above two-family, and still has parking requirements and setbacks. And then here, this teal color is all multifamily, when in reality, you don't have a lot. You have some single-family, two-family, three-family. It's not all multifamily here. So a lot of these homes here that you see in this darker blue are actually grandfathered in because for some reason that whole area was considered multifamily when zoning was created. And then again, I couldn't tell you why, but you have an island here of C1 light commercial when you have some residential, you have commercial already mixed in there. And so the proposed district boundaries that we're creating here would bring in all of those areas that are crossing into different zone districts that have similar uses, but would actually create a contiguous downtown zone district, and all in that C3. So again, here's the proposed boundary of the new downtown district. See, it does encompass Rhine River. It does go down behind there on Olive Street. This is down Olive to 4th. I'm sorry, this is to 2nd Street.
Cedar.
Down to Cedar, and then it cuts across Cedar and 4th here and goes down Elm and encompasses properties on Elm. That was a large discussion at Planning and Zoning Commission to leave Cedar Street out of this. Cedar Street is completely built out. It is historic single-family homes, and there was no reason to include that for potential redevelopment, and that's already zoned single-family, as you can see here. Cedar Street is zoned single-family residential. But when you go one block over, Elm Street is already zoned C2 overlay, which already allows for single-family, two-family, and commercial. And we're having you're having multiple zone districts in this area where a lot of the uses are already permitted. And so this would be just a way to clean it up a lot easier. So it comes.
Did you say you went over on 4th? So you went up Cedar to 4th? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So you have one block of Cedar that would be part of it? Is that
Correct, right in front of Borgia Grade School.
That's
Okay.
3rd Street. 3rd is what he meant.
I'm sorry, 3rd Street, yeah.
Yeah, because 4th is up.
This is 4th Street, my apologies.
That's not on there.
Yeah, my apologies.
The 3rd to,
Once you hit 3rd and Cedar where it becomes residential, none of that is included.
okay, thank you.
Yep. And then it crosses 5th Street here and does go down to 6th for this block. This was a portion we discussed, went back and forth with at Planning and Zoning for multiple months. The reason that is included, there's a discussion early on to include both sides of 5th Street. And the reason being, if you actually went back and looked at historic photos of 5th Street in this area, when it was first built, a lot of those structures were zero lot line right up to Fish Street, just like you see with the coffee shop here. That's an original structure. And if someone were to come in and want to redevelop Fish Street back to what it was historically, that is not something we want to discourage with the current zoning code that wouldn't allow that. And so that was how Fish Street originally got added. And the reason you see it stretching down to 6th is because St. Peter's and Emmanuel Lutheran own the whole block. And when you have a zoning district that follows a property line, or zoning districts do follow the property line, that is why it continues south down to 6th Street in these areas. And so it goes across 6th Street here over to Market, and then stays clean along Market Street all the way back to the river. So any property that has access to Market Street is now included in this district, meaning that Market Street would now be considered the eastern boundary of downtown. So again, here, this is highlighting that area, overlaying that zoning map. So you can see here are all the zonings that now, all the properties and all the different zoning districts that now will be brought into that C3. So again, you have some single family here, properties here. None of that is actually used single family. That's Borgia Church. There's a parking lot and then their athletic field. This is the Jesuit Hall. You have Bleckman's, Corncup Pipe Factory, Tibby in this industrial area, and then you have the law firm and the wine bar here that is in C1 light commercial. All those will be brought into C3. All those uses would be allowed to continue. And then again, it goes down to the south side of 6th Street here, or 5th Street here, encompasses Emmanuel Lutheran and St. Peter's, and then going north on Market Street, again, it includes any property that is has frontage on Market Street. So these are just highlighting the properties that would actually be rezoned. We have sent them letters letting them know of each planning zoning meeting and the meeting here tonight. Again, most of the comments we received were about the property taxes. If there's any changes that are going to be required of them, we let them know that that is not a requirement. And again, lastly here is the proposed downtown district. You know, for the recommendations, staff has recommended approval of this rezoning for all of those properties to bring them into the C3 business district, again, to make that orderly and compact as much as we can. It was a unanimous vote at planning and zoning. Again, it was reviewed and edited at 4 consecutive meetings. 2 points I want to bring up that'll be at a future meeting. It has to go to P&Z one more time for the language, and then at your next meeting after that. They voted to have a special use permit requirement downtown for any zero lot lines at 4-way intersections. So whenever a building is built right at a 4-way intersection and they would like to have a zero lot line, they do have to request a special use permit to be reviewed to make sure that site distance and everything is still going to be suitable there. A great example of that was at Main and Market, where all that construction was just completed. The current code does not require a special use permit for that. Once all 4 sides of that corner of that intersection was built up, it did diminish the site distance when you're turning that turn a little bit and required a 4-way intersection, but that was reactive of us to go in and put a stop sign after it was built. And this would require, if someone wanted to build that, submit plans up front. We could then determine if a stop sign or some type of traffic calming is required at that point, and they'll have to apply for that special use permit. So that is a change that is going along with this to make this safer for these intersections and for future development. And then lastly, we will have in that code update a definition actually defining the growth boundary in the C3 intent and purposes section. In your packet tonight, there has been 1 letter submitted in opposition. That was the only opposition that we received. There was some comments on Elm Street, but once those property owners realized they're already in a commercial district, I think they realized that we weren't actually making any major changes to them. Tony Paquette has, and we did put that in your packet, and he is here tonight, has requested that the Tibby Power building be removed from this because of the reasoning that they have more industrial uses that are permitted in there. I will point out that there are parking requirements there right now. If they wanted to get an occupancy permit, they would be required to provide off-street parking. They wouldn't be given a credit for the public parking across the street because it is in an industrial district. If you're rezoned to C3, what staff thinks is any feasible use that will go in there that's compatible with downtown would not have to provide its own parking because it has the credit across the street. Right now, that's not available to them in the current zoning. But that request isn't there tonight, and I'm sure he can speak on his behalf. Tony is here. But that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the ordinance does follow this public hearing.
Well, according to the letter, it says his properties, because of limitations on usage which would result, is how it states. So what limitations would this lead to that Tibby building? Just like as you said, I mean, you couldn't add on?
There are not,
Special use permit.
no, there are not industrial, right now that is permitted for light industrial. So there's manufacturing uses that can go in there today, however, they would still have to provide parking to get occupancy.
If it's left M1.
If it's left M1. If we rezone it to C3, any mixed use, any commercial use that is permitted in the downtown district, but not any manufacturing uses, not any, but very little manufacturing is permitted in C3.
Could that not be, you grandfathered two others with an industrial use?
There's not a current use
But
in
there's
there.
not a current use.
Oh.
It is the building, I checked, I don't know what information Tony can provide you, but I think I asked Sal today, I think there is, I don't think there's been occupancy of any use that would be grandfathered at this time.
But I assume, well, we'll wait to hear from him. I assume he's thinking there might be.
I think the building's for sale, and I think that's part of their argument, is that they wanted to keep all of those options open.
All right.
So it is a possibility to remove that parcel from this list on the zoning. I would say that it would kind of defeat the purpose of keeping it compact and contiguous with the zoning, but that is a possibility to remove that. And if they wanted to come in and request the C3 zoning later, if they have a buyer who says, yep, I want to do, a wine bar, a brewery, that's permitted in C3, then they could get it rezoned to C3 later. And then they wouldn't have to worry about parking. Right now, anything that is not zoned C3 is supposed to provide their own off-street parking.
Depending upon use.
Good, if, I'll wait till we hear from you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, are there any other questions by council members? Any concerns?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sal. Okay, so it's a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the council on this item? Tony, come on up.
Good evening. I guess
So
my concern-
state your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
and your
Tony
address.
Paquette, and the address of the property in question would be 426 Front Street.
Okay.
Better known as the Tibby Power Company. Right now, I don't have a use for it, like Darren said, but I guess my concern is if I have a tenant that comes to me, next month and wants to do a use that's M1, and if I go ahead and agree to the C3, then I would have to come back to this council and ask, for special use permit. So that would be my concern, something I can do now that I won't be able to do once it's C3. I understand fully the city's trying to alleviate the parking requirements, especially like South Side and the historical downtown district. So I do understand that. My concern would be, I just don't know where to go with it. My thought would be if I left it M1, I have options that I have now. If I have a tenant or a use for it that really C3 works, well then at that point, I guess would that be the proper time to come back and ask for C3?
If I could, Tony, what would you do though if you had a proposed use, and without having the parking table and the uses that correspond to it, and it required 10 off-street parking spaces? What would you do at that point?
I have some off-street parking, so.
Okay, how many spaces?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And again, I don't know, I just don't have a plan yet.
Is there some space next to your building, like between that building and then
Yeah,
the wine
there's
cellar?
already some
Is there
off-street parking.
space
I know
in
there's
there?
some in the back, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, you'd go to the west side of the building.
It's on the west side of the building.
And it opens up in the back. So those would be my concerns. I'm not necessarily completely opposed to it. I think that, I'm just worried that if I get a tenant or I have a use that I can do now, and I can't do it then, and I haven't researched all of it yet. I mean, I like the fact that there's no parking requirement. And I guess that's really where I'm at with it. I just don't know what to do.
So you don't know what to do.
Tony, if I understand right, though, you're saying that, okay, if you got someone, a renter, come in, and you were not included in this new overlay, and someone came in, but their business would be helped by it, you could come back and ask for that.
Yeah, that would be my thought.
Well, what is the difference between that and coming back and asking for a special use on light industrial?
Because I know I probably wouldn't be granted that.
Oh.
Elijah's is the best argument, okay? Every point that Sal just made about no parking requirements, it helps the downtown historical district. Elijah's fits everything Sal just mentioned, but Elijah's wasn't included in this. Elijah's is the only parcel on Front Street, commercial parcel, that's not included in this. Elijah's the only downtown business that's not included in this. So I don't know, you know, Sal talked about spot zoning and islands. Once you guys approve this, Elijah's will still be an island. Talked about, Sal talked about another property that was owned C2. You guys let it be C3, and then it came back for conditional use. You know, I'm only 2 blocks removed from this district. So again, I don't know why Elijah's wasn't included. Is there any questions from the board? And again, I'm not opposed to the Tibby. I just don't, I just don't know yet. I guess if that's fair. I would think that maybe I could just come back later and ask for C3.
Okay.
And you think you would get that more than you would get the other one?
I would think so, because you guys are asking for it now. Why wouldn't you grant it to me later?
Okay. All right, any questions by council members?
Nope.
Anyone? Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on this item? Okay. So at this point, we'll accept the
Make a
public
motion.
hearing.
Did Sal say it's got to go back to planning and zoning
No,
for
No.
language?
No, this is,
No.
this is,
you have an ordinance later after.
I thought he said it was going back for
Those
language.
additional things.
No, there is an additional change, not in zoning. So this is actually rezoning, bringing properties into C3. There is actual language change that we're proposing in C3 that will be at planning and zoning next week, and then we'll bring it back to council. That is the special use permit for 0 lot lines at 4-way intersections, and then changing the definition, so.
Okay.
Okay, so Joe, did you accept this into the minutes?
yes.
Somebody second it?
Well, I mean, to get back to what Tony's saying, if he wants out, so he doesn't want C3, correct? At this moment?
Tibby, correct.
Okay. Why can't we leave him out of it for right now?
You can.
You can.
You
Okay,
can.
That's what we're gonna do?
You can.
You can't, somebody has to make a
That's-
motion
that's
to
up to you
do
guys.
that. I mean,
The
on
ordinance
that,
tonight, yeah, I'm sorry. The ordinance tonight is listed by parcel number. We could, and address, we could remove any one of those on there. We were just trying to make it as compact as you can, but.
I understand.
If he had a
He's
use in the.
unsure what he wants to do. If he wants out of it, leave him out of it.
Yep. And then he is correct. He could come back for a request to bring it to C3 later, and my recommendation would be the same, to bring it into C3.
So we're gonna vote on this tonight?
It's
it's the next
item on the
It's the next
agenda.
item on the agenda.
Another point of clarity, he mentioned the Elijah's. Did Elijah's not want C3?
No, they do.
They do. So
That's what they requested.
Yes.
But they didn't get it.
And how come they can't have it?
So they requested C3 a year ago, maybe, and the determination at that point, the recommendation from staff, and even at P&Z too, was that they were removed from the district by a block and a half, and approving that to C3 would be there's two items. One, you'd be creating an island, you'd be spot zoning it on its own when it's not contiguous. Same way, there was one property on market 6 months ago that asked for it, and we recommend denial of that one as well because it wasn't contiguous with the existing district. And the second being, that has been a property that has parking concerns with the surrounding properties, and bringing it to C3 and allowing it to not have parking.
We've got parking concerns all over town.
No, and I understand, and that was brought up, we could extend this past to Elijah's. Planning and Zoning Commission voted not to do that.
Yeah, well, I don't understand.
Yes.
I
Just
mean,
a minute.
Hold on.
Oh, wait, Tony, you have to come up, please.
I just want to make sure the Alderman all understand, I did ask Planning and Zoning to include Elijah's in this C3 overlay, and they refused.
and I don't understand.
Citing parking.
I think, what Tony just said, I think that's the key issue, is.
But we're trying to alleviate the parking restrictions requirements in the downtown, but yet we will burden Elijah's with it. It's the only property on Front Street, gentlemen.
Yeah, but
and
do you-
ladies, and it's the only property downtown.
Yeah, but your parking overflows into the citizens'
Every
street.
event we have downtown overflows.
Yeah, but doesn't
into,
flow into
downtown and all over.
Doesn't flow into residential.
Sure it does. Up and down Cedar Street.
You don't understand.
Every time you have an event.
You don't understand
it's,
what's
boarded.
going on over there. I know what's going on over there.
I know, but I mean, you got a $1 million building there with a guy trying to do something and he can't get anything done. You know, you got, every time Borgia has a festival, we're parking in a residential area. Every time he has an event and an overflow, yeah, you might get into parking in a residential area. But I mean, as far as the way it used to run, whenever it was a restaurant, they had adequate parking, correct? When they were a
there was-
restaurant, they had adequate parking.
Yes.
But now they don't.
There's been uses that were proposed to change. For example, they have a tent that they put up for special occasions. I think it's up most of the time of the year. They approached staff and wanted to go ahead and put a permanent pavilion, correct?
Correct.
And once I think our building code said basically once you got over 1 day over 6 months.
Correct.
Then it became a permanent structure. Permanent structure then kicked in new parking requirements. And so that is probably the key. They have got, I think, based upon the last use or the parking that was submitted to us on their plan, they meet that code by, I think, by maybe 1 parking space. If I'm correct. Tony's shaking his head, Sal's shaking his head. Okay, or something very close. They were right at it. And the issue is, if that was something permanent, well, then it's going to require more parking spaces. And if it does, then you're going to either meet it and build the parking spaces, or you can request a variance and go to the Board of Adjustment.
Well, I just think it's strange that we can, you know, squeeze them into downtown because it's been there forever. It's a beautiful building. Man spent a lot of money and is going to continue to spend a lot of money, and we can't accommodate him at all.
I think the question would be before the Board of Adjustment, for example, now, that if he wanted to make that a permanent structure, is there adequate room on the lot for additional parking?
But C3 would solve that.
But
It
C3 would
remove
say,
parking requirement.
no, you do not have to
Same
have
requirement that you're going to do from everybody downtown, everybody, except for Elijah's.
I think the question you got to ask is, do you want to require the developer to go ahead and put in additional parking on the front of that lot? Or do you want to rezone them to C3 and let it go? That's the question.
Right.
I also see a piece, and I see the Elijah one is very different from this one. I thought also another piece was you have an apartment complex between there and downtown, so it's not contiguous, okay? It's not going to be
Get the senior
that.
housing, yeah.
Right.
But you
And
could
so-
make a motion to include that so it is all contiguous. I would
Well,
include
let's
that.
let's let Mark finish.
Yeah, well, okay, so their businesses, I mean, how far out you gonna go? You know, there'll be another fine business on Fifth Street somewhere and say, hey, I want that.
Well,
You
we're
know,
talking
you gave
about-
it to them and they weren't contiguous to your downtown area.
Well, it's downtown. I mean, it's been downtown. It's been on Front Street for over 100 years. I mean, he's close. I mean,
Not by definition.
Dwayne, the concern I would have about adding the Elijahs at this point is it's never been a part of the public hearing process related to this.
Yeah.
And the property owners who are adjacent to that don't know anything about a proposal to add that to C3. If you want to add that to C3, in my view, you should act on this first, or table the whole thing, send it all back to planning and zoning, and then come back with the new map after the neighbors have been given an opportunity to speak about adding Elijahs. Because based on what we have seen in the past, I think they're going to come out of the woodwork complaining about the parking problem.
I know they
But-
will.
Well,
I know they will.
they're Joe's neighbors, so, but at this point, I don't think it's appropriate to add this because the neighbors have not had an opportunity to be heard. You're essentially sliding something in at the, it's easier, in my opinion, to take something out because we know that that's always a possibility once it was originally included, but not to throw something in that's never been discussed, not at any of the public hearings.
I don't know all the ins and outs. I think it's a shame that he can't be included.
Well,
But-
and if that's something that you want to consider, my view is you take what's here tonight and vote it up or down, and then if you want to come back and add him, then come back and do that as a separate proposal.
Or table
Or
this,
table the whole thing, send it all back to planning and zoning,
and then go through your hearing
the
process.
whole process again with his property, with the, not his
Because
property,
basically,
Washington Plains added in.
the notification list is based upon whatever the area is and 185 feet beyond that. So new notification have to be sent out.
Which we can do, but you'd
Yeah.
have to start over.
Well, I'm one of 8. I don't know how anybody else feels, but
I'm not particularly opposed to it. I think for me, though, like, there's no parking, like, you can park on Front Street until you get to that block. And you can park on Stafford Street except on that block. And there's no city parking lots convenient too. So that's, to me, like, the only difference I see is if we go 0 parking requirements for that property, it has to go into residential neighborhoods where there's no other option, as opposed to everything else that's covered there. There's at least street parking in front of them.
I agree.
So, I mean, that's the only thing for me, I'm like, it feels like it only pushes them onto Main Street and.
But every time we have a downtown event, I don't care if you're at Borger, at the at Farmers Market or whatever, it can, you know, if it's a large crowd, it bleeds back into the community on Second Street, Third Street, Cedar, Elm, all of it.
Yeah, but you don't have that every weekend and every night.
Well, I don't think he's there every weekend, every night either.
Yes.
It's a wedding venue, I mean,
Yes, there is.
probably.
It's a wedding event. I'm sure he'd like to have it every
I'd
weekend.
love to have
That
it
would be the
that
goal.
way. But we don't. It's
I'm
not-
sure he wants his business that
it's
good,
not
right,
the
Tony?
nature of
I
the
would
game,
think.
unfortunately.
I mean, I've had a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble.
Tony, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
If we did table this and brought it back, do you think, I know Joe's gonna say hell yeah, but do you think that this place would be filled with resident people living over
Well,
there?
sure, but I've been developing a building for a long time. It's the same tired old argument from all the neighbors, parking, this, traffic, it's the same tired argument. Somebody developed the piece that they live in. Elijah's, when everybody that's around there bought their house, I can promise Elijah, most of them have not been there as long as Elijah's been a commercial property.
Yeah, but when Eliza was a restaurant, the gate was closed off to the Main Street and Jansen Street.
But the gate was there, the fire department required the gate.
Yes, they put the gate there so they could keep the parking
So we can
over
close the gate,
Elijah's.
but I don't think the fire department's going
The
to.
fire department had
Right.
access to that. So when it was a restaurant, nobody came into the residential area, and there was plenty of parking for a restaurant, not a wedding venue.
I wouldn't be opposed to closing the gate if it solves the problem.
Do it right now.
You know,
So I was
I
gonna
can't.
ask, sorry,
I
Mark,
can't.
I was just going, in the middle of
Here's the fire
I was gonna ask
department.
that question too, is the gate still the issue? If they close the gate with 0 parking requirements there, the parking overflows onto Front Street or wherever else.
It can go to
somebody wants
Stafford, it
park
can
at.
go to Front, but
Joe, my
again,
question to you is.
I
does
cannot close the gate.
Solve the issue of it does, right? Oh, yeah. But the fire department.
I'd be happy to close the gate if the fire department will let me
But
close it.
we've also got lock boxes in other parts of town to fix that fire department gate.
Yes.
It's a no parking spot in front, a lock box goes on it. I mean,
That would be a
an
simple
option.
solution.
An option.
This also has a noise factor too.
I understand that, but it's also, and that goes back to what Tony's saying, it was commercial when they bought their house next to it is part of that too. I don't know. I don't know where we stood on the gate.
To me, what Sal has brought before us, and excuse me, but it doesn't even include Elijah's. What he has brought before us and what I think we need to act on is what Sal brought to us. If somebody wants to go back and bring up Elijah's and bring it back up again to it, that's fine. But I think right now, we should look at this plan and yes or no with Mr. Biquette's request for exception. If there's an exception to be made, I think that would be it. But I think we need to stay with this. I think Elijah's a separate,
You're right.
separate issue.
I mean, just from my recommendation, I would prefer not to tie the two together, because if we are going to send out another letter, it could muddy the waters between this request for what we're trying to do and what we're accomplishing here, to tying this entire district development tied to a parking conversation on one side of it. And so I would, I mean, if it's possible to maybe still vote on this yes or no tonight, and then have a addition to later. So, and I will
For
point out,
Elijah's, you mean?
for Elijah's and,
Well, that's-
well,
yeah.
and the apartments,
I would
and the
agree.
apartments, because we want to keep it, so. And I will just point out, I know there are property owners who are wanting to make investment in this new district because there are uses that are now allowed that weren't allowed. And they've been put off by planning and zoning tabling this twice already. So I'd like to at least move this portion forward if possible.
Sal, what are your thoughts if we move this forward with an exemption of the Tibby building, that address,
I mean,
as Tony requested?
yeah, it doesn't, it obviously still has an island in there, but it's still a step in the right direction. I mean, it's still cleaning up 90%, 99% of, it's still accomplishing what we're wanting to do. And then if he has a user that needs to be C3 later, I will stand up here and recommend approval of that all day long, because it does need to be.
My personal opinion, I think that's a very good possibility.
Yeah.
It's just a matter that, without taking away an option.
Yeah.
Can I clarify, it's not just the Tibby building, you're asking for Front Street Cellars also?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was looking at the letter and I thought it included
I
that.
think my
Thank you.
attorney inadvertently included.
Okay, thank you.
Because I own both. My
Yep.
concern was the Tibby building.
Okay.
Which one is that on your list, Sal? Aren't they numbered or no? Well, we could just say Tibby.
Do it by address.
It's 426 Front
Yes.
Street, right?
Because I don't know the parcel number by heart, but if you make the motion by address, we can
All right.
make that amendment in the ordinance.
All right.
I guess I'd just like to add one more thing, and if there's already any more questions, but I still believe that, Elijah's should have been included when this was originally done. And there's, again, it's the only business on Front Street that was excluded. It's the only business downtown that was excluded. It should have been brought in when all this was done. So, that's all I have.
All right.
Thank you.
Tony,
Thank
where would
you.
you park the people if you did put that gate in?
We'd park where we park now. They'd probably go to Stafford Street. There's all kinds of parking there. I can use the lots that the city has in front of, like Sugar Fire or 514. So there's parking all through there.
You could shuttle them from the pool parking lot.
What's that?
The pool parking lot,
We could even use that and shuttle people. We've done that before too.
that was suggested, but.
Yeah. And again, I just think it's important that the whole point here, and Sally even mentioned about, was to alleviate the parking requirements downtown, but yet we have no problem hamstringing Elijah's with it. When I have the largest parcel downtown with the most parking. It makes no sense.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So if I understand you correctly, we're going to vote on what's presented. Well, first, we're going to
gotta
accept
just
this
enter this
into the
accept this
minutes.
into the
Can we
minutes,
accept this into the
unless there's
minutes?
any other
Without
Well, is there anyone else who wants to address the council on this item? Okay. All right, so we need a motion. Did you say that, Joe?
You already
Yeah.
did a motion,
To accept the minutes.
except in the minutes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Patke, to accept this item into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item.
An ordinance rezoning the certain real property to C3 General Commercial Zoning District in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. Now, is this one what do we do next
Yeah,
then?
you need somebody to make a motion to amend the ordinance excluding 426 West Front.
So moved.
Second.
And then you need to vote on that the amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion by Patke, seconded by Holtmeyer, to exclude the property at 426 West Front Street from this ordinance. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by your vote, that property is now removed.
All right, so with that, Joe introduced the ordinance, so now you need second reading and a vote.
Just read it another time.
Yeah.
An ordinance rezoning the certain real property to C3 General Commercial Zoning District in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Sullentrup?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
Yep.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Citizens' comments?
Hey, can you hold on just a second? So Sal, what's our next step now as a council? Does Tony need to make an application, or how does this, where do we go next?
If we want to actually amend it to include out to Elijah's, I don't think that would necessarily be an application he needs to make, because we do need to include the apartments in between and resend that letter. So unfortunately, we don't have time to add it to planning and zoning next week. That agenda has been set, and so I can put it on November's agenda to include that. And then if I'm so directed to do that, and then it would come back to council after that.
And you would be directed by,
I was going to say, wouldn't you need a motion and second by the council to make that?
Yes.
well, that's what I'm wondering. Who's going to direct you to do that? A letter from Tony, or the council's going to direct you to do that?
Council.
Okay, so do we do that right now?
Who directed Sal to do this?
Well,
86 lots.
I brought it up to Planning and Zoning Commission, and they said, yeah, bring it back to our next meeting.
That came out of planning and zoning, so, yeah.
I don't think you're going to get that from planning and zoning on this other one. And
Oh, I understand. I'm
That's
just
why,
asking
that's
how-
why I'm asking.
where do
if-
we need to go?
Where do we need to go?
Well, that's
if
why
you
I'm
have it,
asking.
yeah,
That's
if
what
you've
I'm
got a
saying, because
majority
I don't
of
want
the
to,
council-
I don't want all of a sudden be, well, they never did anything.
Yeah.
Well, what do we need to do to look at this?
I think a motion to put it on the next P and Z agenda.
Right.
So we need a motion to put it on the
November.
November planning
I'll
and
make it.
zoning. Okay, we have a motion by Reed.
Can I just make sure that
Okay.
it's very clear? So the motion would be not only for Sal to go ahead and have it for the Elijah McLean's, but also the senior housing development that's adjacent to it, so that we can keep the C3 district compact and contiguous. I just want to make sure that that's very clear.
Yeah.
Is there an issue with that, Sal, with the senior housing?
They'd still be,
No.
it's,
stop
it's,
there,
it's
but-
Yeah, the
it's
use is.
residential and
yeah.
it's permitted.
No, it would still be permitted. Again, that was looked at, Mr. Burkett came to a planning and zoning commission meeting. It was determined because of its, even though you have other uses bleeding into, you have C3 bleeding into other dense and mixed use residential uses. Once you cross Stafford Street here, it's pretty strictly single family only, and so that was their argument. But yes, we can bring it back to the November Planning and Zoning Commission. Mark, is it possible to conditionalize a rezoning?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just didn't know if the gate was that big of a deal, if you could add that.
big
but
deal.
but you can't conditionalize the rezoning, so I don't know how you can tie those two together without just taking their word for it to be closed.
But I don't know if we'd heard that before, that it would be.
Oh, that was the first, we had brought that up
We brought that up, didn't
years
we?
ago, and they didn't, because that was a big sticking point, that you could put a lockbox on there for the fire department, but keep patrons from parking on Johnson and Main in. And that was the first we had heard that, so I think.
Yeah, because that was brought up numerous times.
I don't, Tony's gone, but we have made it clear that you could go to the variance board, and you could make a pretty strong case that to get a variance for parking if there was certain conditions met, because it's no secret that that tent is up 6 months out of the year, and so that use is already happening half of the year anyway. You're just allowing it to happen the other half of the year. We're saying maybe you could close the gate, add some parking on Stafford, that kind of thing.
Well, I would also add that the tent being up over 6 months out of the year turns into a permanent structure. So there's other building requirements you have to do, fire lane access, other things that it doesn't meet as a temporary structure. So it just triggers it into a different code section with the building code.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to send this to council, to planning and zoning, and then we will figure it out there.
Yeah,
What we
I'll
can do, what
have it on the
we
agenda.
can't do, what it triggers, and then we'll bring a report back to council. Does that work? Okay. All those, did we vote?
No, we just have one motion. Reed made the motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Reed, seconded by Patke, to ask planning and zoning to include this on their agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Gotta do a roll call.
I better do a roll call.
You want to do roll call?
Yeah.
Okay. Sullentrup? Holtmeyer?
No.
Scornia?
No.
Pettit?
No.
Reed?
Yep.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Wessels? It passed.
Okay, so 5-3.
Yes.
Okay, so that will be back at planning and zoning.
Starts at P and Z.
Or P and Z, yes. Okay,
Hey, Sandy, all these things it's going to trigger, or could possibly trigger, could we have that at our next meeting?
well, that's what I was, in my head, I had that going on, that
But
once we
you
go to,
never came out with it.
yeah.
You started that way, and then that's why I'm saying something.
I think that if we could find out then what the process is from planning and zoning, or even at our next meeting, because it won't go until the November.
Right.
And Sal and John, you could put together what, for our next meeting, what that will trigger. And then that way, because it's more, there's more to it than just
Rezoning.
rezoning. But as council, you need to be aware of all that information.
Yeah, it's a lot to process when you're voting on a rezoning.
Right. So I think we're doing the right thing by taking it back, but we can look up what those items will
We'll
be
figure out what the
triggered.
building code requirements are as a part of it, is what John alluded to, is if that's a permanent structure.
Specific to the tent, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, are we good? All right. Thank you.
Citizens' comments?
Okay, is there anyone here who would like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda? Okay.
Ordinances and resolutions. An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a service agreement, MOU, Mobility Device Sharing Services by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Neutron Holdings, Inc.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. So this is the Lime scooter ordinance agreement that we talked about earlier. Are there any questions or comments?
Mark? I know that you, Sandy, and Darren had your little conversation before the meeting, so what can we do about this? Can the city have downtown Washington take it over?
You can ask them to, but if you do not contract with Lime directly, they will continue to use your streets and the Riverfront Trail and wherever else that they're going. And if there's a problem with an accident due to a pothole or a sewer grate or whatever, you'll still be potentially exposed to liability for that, but you will no longer have an insurance, which they're required to provide now, insurance to insure you against those claims as well as to indemnify you against those claims. That will no longer exist. They'll have that presumably with downtown Washington, but it won't protect you because you're not a party to that contract.
I said before, I'll say it again, I just think that if they're downtown Washington is the ones getting all this money from the city of Washington to have this, I don't know why they just can't take the contract over and run it themselves.
And I do just want to clarify, that was not something that they requested. Whenever we found out that that was the minimum amount that the city gets, we just wanted to make this clear that the city didn't reach out to Lime for a moneymaker. We just thought, well, let's give it to downtown since we have that opportunity. You know, they didn't necessarily reach out and ask for it.
I guess we could decide, do it for downtown 6 months and do it for somebody else 6
Yes,
months. I mean, we're not, that's just kind of how it got set up because of the question.
Correct.
And we did not want
Is
it.
there anything about the ordinance that dictates that's where that money goes? So like if we were to approve this, but then we revisit, so there's not that perceived financial benefit?
No, it
Does that-
does not specify. Right now, we receive a check $200 a month or plus if it's a busy month, and then annually, we write a check to downtown.
Are there any other questions?
Need to go to a vote?
So Dwayne just left the room?
You ready?
Either wait, or one of our voters.
One of our, we need to know what's going on here, don't we? I guess we wait? Okay. We can take a break.
While we're waiting, Mark, what would be the reason again for that there?
For,
Not allowing them to take it over? They have liability insurance right
you,
now.
you can allow them to do that, but they're still going to be using your streets and your, I guess they get to use the Riverfront Trail. I don't
That was a
remember that. I understand that. But they're not going to be providing you with insurance to protect you against claims from using their scooters. And they would not also have the provision that they're indemnifying you against claims from users of the scooters who are using those on your property.
Would their insurance that they use for any other event covered?
Downtown's insurance?
3 million, is that what it is?
Downtown's insurance?
Yeah, $3 million. I don't know if it would or not. I don't even know, I have no idea whether downtown Washington would even be interested in taking
you
this
know,
over.
Why would they, I guess, if you're giving them $200+ every month for doing nothing, why would they want to take something over?
But we don't have to give them to them.
Yeah, if the money's the issue, we could keep the money.
Yeah.
And I think the
I don't
reason-
think downtown wants to.
I don't think there's necessarily anything for them to take over, because like Chief said, we would still be enforcing everything. We'd still be reviewing at the traffic committee.
Do that anyway with vehicles or people walking, riding bikes.
Right. I'm not really clear about what they would be taking over.
Well, they take the contract and prove the city of Washington with $3 million insurance, and then you can $200+ every month that they get. I'm not saying, you know, we have to do it. I'm just saying it's an opportunity for them to take it over and leave us out of it. I mean, why we got to be the middleman for something that somebody else is getting money for?
I would highly recommend we reconsider that $200 a month. It is, I mean, that seems to be the issue at hand, and so, I mean, are we willing to vote on I guess I mean, if that's the deal breaker, I think then we reconsider that piece of it.
Just keep it?
Yeah, or yeah, find another worthy use for the dollars.
United Way?
United Way.
I could tell you, I I don't think downtown is looking into this as a moneymaker.
I
I
don't
just
think-
thought it was a service to have available for downtown, for the city.
Well, and that was why we as a city gave it to downtown, was because we did not want to be looking at it as a moneymaker, you know?
Yep.
So we just offered it to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nonprofit organization. It was a
good one.
nice gesture. But that's the bone of
Well,
contention,
we
that
we
I'm
can
not
go ahead and sign
committed
the
to that.
contract, and we can always talk
Yeah.
about the $200.
Grind that out.
Correct.
All right,
We got our voters now.
Okay.
okay.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a service agreement, MOU Mobility Device Sharing Services by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Neutron Holdings, Inc. Solentrup,
Sure.
Holtmeyer,
Aye.
Scornia,
Yes.
Pettit,
Yes,
Reed,
Yep.
Hydrich,
Nay.
Patke,
Yes.
Wessels.
Aye.
Okay, by your vote, you pass the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance authorizing and directing.
Before we go any further, I would like to go back to what we talked about in the workshop, and I'd like to make a motion for the scooters to stay in the proposed new downtown district. So I'll put it out there. If somebody wants to second it, they can. If not, I'm just doing my job, bringing it forward for the people that vote for us, so. Don't care how many phone calls we've not gotten, or this or that, I'm bringing it forward, so.
Is there a second?
What are you saying you're doing it for?
Want to propose all these scooters.
I understand what you're proposing, but you're saying you're doing it why? Because people are telling you they want it downtown.
Yep, they're tired of them being parked in their neighborhoods, this and that.
You can't even get a Lime scooter to your neighborhood.
Oh, they're close. Yep, they're real close. Yep. Yes, sir, you can.
Can't cross 100.
Do we?
Right before 100, you can.
Do we have a second?
I can't.
All right, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I threw it out there.
All right.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an easement electric line overhang by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri.
Solentrup.
Introduced by Councilman Solentrup. This is the item that John brought up.
Correct. It's a 15-foot wide overhang easement for new utility poles going along Stafford Street. Does not allow for any appurtenances and poles and/or guide wires or anything else. It does allow access over that 15-foot to service the poles in the right-of-way. But again, nothing of physical nature will be placed on the property.
I'm glad there's no appurtenances.
Don't you like that word? Have to use
That's a big
it.
word, that appurtenance. I was actually looking that one up.
You have to bring that word home and use it.
Yeah.
Why is there a
Oh.
W-9 form in the packet?
Why is there a W-9 form?
In the middle of this?
fair question.
That's, Ameren sends it to us. I don't know, that was the packet that they gave us.
To show that you are an entity.
Yeah.
Yeah, request for taxpayer identification.
Just request for taxpayer identification.
We've got one.
Okay. I just
Give
was
it to
curious
us.
why we would have a W-9 in the middle of this ordinance, but that's why I was asking.
Ameren gave us, basically the legal language plus the exhibit plus additional just forms for the document, and I just threw it in the packet as well.
Okay.
It was included in the PDF that they sent.
Okay. You get ready? Okay.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an easement electric line overhang by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Union Electric doing business as Ameren, Missouri. Solentrup,
Yes.
Holtmeyer,
Aye.
Scornia,
Yes.
Pettit,
Yes,
Reed,
Yes.
Hydrich, Patke,
Yes.
Wessels.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
You all.
An ordinance accepting the bid from Landscape Structures and to approve the purchase of a playground at Phoenix Park by the City of Washington, Missouri.
Padkey.
You guys are fighting over this here. I'm going to give it to Hydrich, okay? Introduced by Councilman Hydrich.
That's great. He gets more phone calls than I do.
All right, that's right.
Obviously, everybody shuts their phones off. I don't know.
Yes, so this was the playground we discussed in the workshop to be installed at Phoenix Park next to the pavilion. Staff will be doing some site grading and shifting of the trail. We'll have a fence around it, and the price comes in at $243,756. And last I heard, could be delivered as early as January.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay,
An ordinance accepting the bid from Landscape Structures and to approve the purchase of a playground at Phoenix Park by the City of Washington, Missouri. Solentrup? Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
Yep.
Hydrich?
Aye, and thank you.
Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
by your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you. Thank you, Wayne.
An ordinance amending the 2022 budget for the period of October 1, 2021 through September 30th, 2022 for the City of Washington, Missouri.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. Mary?
Good evening. Included in your packet is a budget amendment for a couple of different items. The first reason is to amend the budget for the ARP funding and offset for related payout of wages and sewer extension. And the second item is to rebudget capital items and projects that were ordered or have been delayed in 2021, fiscal year 2021, and therefore will not be delivered or completed until fiscal year 2022, and they were not included in the original budget that we just recently approved. And normally I don't do that and look at those items until beginning of November, but since we were doing this budget amendment for the ARP funding, I went ahead and put as much of those items as that I knew about that were crossing over between fiscal years. I went ahead and included those in this budget amendment. So we may end up having some additional items that I have to come back in October or in November for, but I tried to get as many of those items as I could in this budget amendment, so.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary.
An ordinance amending the 2022 budget for the period of October 1, 2021 through September 30th, 2022 for the City of Washington, Missouri. Solentrup?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
Yep.
Hydrich?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Houseman Subdivision, Plat 3 in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer.
This is a lot easier than anything else I've brought tonight. This is a boundary adjustment on Riverview. We've looked at this property before for a special use permit, so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but for some reason when this subdivision was platted, there was a little eyebrow platted here. I don't know if there were some utilities at one point. Obviously, it wasn't built that way, but this property line went out adjacent from that original right-of-way. The applicant is now requesting to move that property line and square it up with how the road actually looks today. So it still meets the setback, and it actually just cleans it up so it squares it to the existing street. So recommend approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
That's it.
Move the house.
Any questions or comments?
When the road was built back then, that actually was a gully, a ditch. And since the city owned the park to the north side, they decided not to move the lot lines at the time. We were able to find some topographic.
Oh, you figured that out.
Yep.
Not that it matters, but.
That's Purdy's Woods. Okay. Any questions? All right.
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Houseman Subdivision, Plat 3 in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Solentrup?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
Yep.
Hydrich? Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance establishing the salary for the city administrator for the City of Washington, Missouri.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. This evening, we have the ordinance in our packet establishing the salary for city administrator. So I just wanted to kind of review a few items before we move on with this. This past year, Darren's goals were to revise the personnel rules and regulations with department heads and the legal counsel to prepare for the city council approval. So that was an item that we've been working on since probably last year this time. Our rules and regulations, and the first thing we're going to do is change the name of that. But we have been working on that with department heads and going through it. It was a goal to be completed right around now, except we then, once we did all of our changes to it, we sent it to legal counsel for them to make sure we were doing everything correctly. And it turns out that they now have done some editing to it. They've separated it into actually 2 different booklets, so it is still coming, but it has changed. The dynamics of it have changed a little bit. So we are hoping that that will be ready to go by the first of the year. Assist the Parks Department with a successful opening of the new pool. Obviously, that took place. Provide support for a newly appointed city clerk. That would be like working with insurance renewals, all the other items that the city clerk takes care of, and to provide support for her. And then also, one of his goals was to oversee the salary study results and the implementation of those results. So, as you know, we've been talking about in the last budget discussions that we did do the salary study in order to bring everyone up to the level where the salary study suggested them at 60%, at a 60th percentile. It was going to be about $147,000, which we have been putting that into our budget throughout all our discussions. So moving on, the study that we did complete reviewed the compensation for all of our employees. The pay ranges were based on the 60th percentile of the market data. The study finds, when you're looking at the attached letter to the ordinance, the study determined that Darren's,
Call that all my life.
the city, I saw your brother the other day and called him Darren, so, okay, I got even. Yeah.
right.
So, anyway, the salary study recommended an increase of $27.87. There were quite a few employees who did receive a compensation adjustment. No one received a decrease, and there were 7 employees who we had some higher-end increases than that with 7 other employees. So there were higher increases than that. So we also did the evaluations. Our department heads did evaluations on all our employees, and they were allowed up to a 3% merit increase for how their evaluation was. So that is where the numbers came from. So when you look at the attached letter, the salary study recommendation was the $27.87, and Steve and I did the performance review of Darren, and we recommended the 3% merit increase, which then brings the new annual compensation up to $114,721. So that's how those numbers were arranged. Are there any questions? Comments?
Keep it up.
Thank you, Sandy. I know
You're welcome.
I called today asking Sandy just kind of where the numbers came from, so I appreciate the explanation and,
I did also receive a phone call today from one of our council members asking, we all were just down at the Municipal League conference, and asking why we went back to Austin Peters why didn't we just get our data information from the municipal league? Because of course they have all that. And my answer to that was, well, first of all, in 2017, we had done an agreement with Austin Peters, and that agreement also included the compensation and benefits study. It also included a job audit and analysis of everyone's job. They sat down, I believe, with each one of our employees and asked them what their job obligations were. They also provided us with job description revisions. We have job descriptions for all of our employees now. And then at the last minute, if you remember right, we asked them to provide a performance evaluation paperwork. And that is what we implemented that year and each year to follow. So it makes sense that in 2017, we spent close to $50,000 for all those parts. So it would make sense that we would, after we've been using that evaluation form and using the product that they provided us, that for $82.50, we could get that information and they could follow up again. If at some time we want to go with a different company, we can do that. But right now, I think it's important for us to stay with where we are. So that's my report. So, okay, questions? All right.
An ordinance establishing the salary for the city administrator of the city of Washington, Missouri. Sullentrup?
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
I guess.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
I'm hoping for you bet.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you're going to say.
Hydrich? Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
I don't remember evaluating.
Commission, committee, and board reports. An ordinance approving the final plat of the Overlook at Weber Farms, Plat 6, in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Altmar.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. Sal?
Yeah, so this is the final plat for the Overlook Farms Plat 6, the last phase of the Overlook. It's an additional 36 lots there. The roads have been poured. The detention basin in the lake is starting to fill up. John, our engineering department, did an inspection, so there is a performance agreement in there for the final things that still need to be completed for about $15,000.
Yeah, it's a $14,500 performance bond. The water results at the time were not in. They have been completed. They've passed since then. And then there was, what were we waiting on? It was a couple sewer manholes had to be essentially raised, I think.
So
a couple items, small items.
But,
oh, I'm sorry. It was the electric services. The conduit was in. They were still waiting on electric service in.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Sorry.
But passing this final plat, even without those items, 100% complete allows them to put that performance guarantee in lieu of that, get the final plat recorded and start selling these lots. So I know he's got builders ready to go, and so this allows him to move forward before having everything 100% approved. So.
Sal, how far north of Beaker are we at this spot?
So,
I can help you.
Yeah, this section does not connect to Beaker. Rabbit Trail would, but it is just, it's very close.
Hold on here. Where am I at, Sal?
Zoning map, go up. There you go.
That's later this month.
Okay.
Goes up for auction.
There you go. So that big
Sorry.
square, I don't have my pointer.
Here, it's,
The farm?
does that help you? So you can tie those together?
Yeah, here, you want to go back? So this is the area that just got platted, or this is the final plat that they're requesting, and here's Beaker.
Okay.
So Rabbit Trail is proposed to connect. This final phase has no more stubs, so it's all connected to that existing subdivision.
So it's getting closer.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
The Coke Farm is going up for auction on November 10th. I saw the sign out there, so.
Right, I'd say that too.
I think there's 4 acres. Is that the farm that's got the brown field there?
Yes, yep.
Very
nice to get that connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that when the county improved Beaker Road, they kind of did some preliminary work on that road to where it would tie in?
Correct.
Potentially?
Yeah, I used to have this kind of severe bend here.
Right, they kind of
Now it
eased it.
makes, our long-term, our east-west parkway is proposed to make a 90-degree intersection here, so.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments? Okay.
An ordinance approving of the final plat of the overlook at Weber Farms, Plat 6, in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Solentrop?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Scornia?
Yes.
Pettit?
Aye.
Reed?
Yeah.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Wessels?
By your vote, you approve the ordinance.
Real quick on that, with a performance contract, what that does essentially is it puts money up to finish the subdivision out. That's tied to occupancy inspections of the homes. Okay, so they have to come back again with an ordinance for us to accept the infrastructure and for maintenance, streets, water, sewer, those items. So kind of the triggering mechanism here is we will not plow these streets, snow plow them until that's taken care of. So it's in his best interest to get moving on it, which I think he will. It's just, he didn't want to waste 2 weeks here to get going. So just so we all know that.
Mayor's report?
Well, I actually have a couple things. So, Mark Wessels, congratulations to you for being inducted into the Wings Hall of Honor. Pretty exciting. You received the Educator Award. You came to... Yeah, well, whatever. I remember when you came to Washington as a special education coordinator and went on to be assistant principal and principal of the middle school, right? So thank you for... thank you. And Joe Holtmeyer received recognition from the Archdiocese of St. Louis. He received the Cardinal Regali Service Award, which is an award that goes to individuals who support and go above and beyond in their parishes and in the entire Archdiocese. So thank you, Joe. We recently, there was a POW MIA Day last month, and Terry Solentrop is responsible for that event every year. And if you remember, he had filled out the paperwork for us to become a POW MIA city, and then COVID, we got the designation, but then they were waiting to come out. And so they were at the ceremony that day. So we did receive a proclamation that we will be bringing here to the City Council, and we also will be receiving signs to place at all the entrances of our city, designating us as a POW MIA city. So that happened recently. And the last item is that the cheer team that we gave a proclamation to has now been inducted into the
Yeah, the program in its entirety, and Sandy Gildahouse, the coach.
into the,
First cheer program in the state to be inducted.
all right, so that sounds good. So congratulations to the Borgia cheer team. And that's all I have.
City Administrator's report?
One item we didn't get a chance to go over with, or to go over in the workshop is our street closure policy, or how we work. In years past, I think it was pretty much, street closures were just common to primarily downtown events, whether that be the Chamber or mainly downtown Washington, Inc., et cetera. We would also have the occasional block party, et cetera, that a neighborhood may want to go ahead and request that the streets be blocked for, a day. However, we have received what seems like a lot more requests, and by a lot more, I mean like probably beyond the historical ones that I think we're all used to, just like the Fall Festival that we just went through last weekend, I guess that's when it was. We receive requests now. I think we've got 2 more for this month, as an example. And how many?
You're correct.
2 more. 2 more.
It's expanded. Correct.
But we have received more of those and their requests, and so we were trying to look at what's the best way to go ahead and handle those. Do you want to continue to go ahead and do those? Meaning, all of the requests go before the traffic committee. When they meet once a month, they review them primarily for safety purposes to make sure that some routes are always open, so that they can go ahead and get through. And this includes all the way up to, Mark has got plans for the larger events like the, in May when we do the Art and Wine Fest or whatever, et cetera, stuff like that. So the question was, do we want to continue down that path since we've received so many requests and it's gotten to the point where it's almost, seems like it's every other week, it seems like, especially during the warmer months that people are wanting to request, primarily in downtown. It hasn't been like from a bunch of neighborhoods requesting us to go ahead and have street closures for their block parties. It's been primarily some business owners in downtown. I believe the policy with the Downtown Washington Inc. Board is that they are allowing those business owners to go ahead and use their insurance policy that Downtown Washington Inc. has, which I think has been probably a hindrance in the past from other organizations requesting that. But since Downtown Washington Inc. allows those business owners to go ahead and request it, then that's obviously something, a hurdle that they already have taken care of. So staff has been talking at least at the traffic committee level about wanting to see get in place maybe an ordinance, and one example that was thrown out there for discussion would be for the council, or we would go ahead and pass an ordinance that would recognize the historical events that we've had in town that we expect the streets to be closed for. And those are a couple of the ones I've already mentioned. And then any other event that was not would require council approval. And is that something that the council wants to go ahead and review, et cetera? Or do you want to just leave it open and allow anybody to go ahead and request the streets to go ahead and be closed as long as it goes through traffic committee and emergency response gets their comments in? So right now, that is basically your policy. I mean, there's no limitation on that. However, we have received a lot of them. I know the mayor has received some concerns about it. I know Councilman Sullentrup has told me his concerns over some of them. So I didn't know as a council how you wanted us to move forward, but that would be one option, is to go ahead and have an ordinance recognize those historical ones. Now, we can all debate about what's the historical events, because some of the events, especially walks and stuff like that, have been coordinated for years now. For example, we just had the Alzheimer's walk, et cetera, stuff like that. How far do we want to go? So those are things that we've been debating with the staff, and I think staff just feels that once it gets past the emergency management, angle and making sure that it's safe, are there any limitations? Are we going to allow these to go ahead and be closed every week? I mean, or if it got to that point. It's just we've seen a lot of additional requests that we have not had, I know, in years past. So what I was looking for was any guidance that you may have. You don't have to, any comments are welcome now, obviously, but if you've got some additional comments that you feel about them, you can pass those along to me, and we can, like I said, if we need to. I approached Mark about a month ago about doing an ordinance similar to what I just mentioned earlier, recognizing the other ones, the historical ones. All other requests would have to come to council for approval. Obviously, you meet twice a month, and you could go ahead and review those at that time. But the question is, how many street closures is too many? Or is it a relevant question? So
when you do a walk, like the Alzheimer's walk, does that come through traffic? Does that, or how does?
But normally, there's no streets we have to block or anything. We require they maintain the sidewalks. Certain runs the YMCA does that are on the roads. We don't provide intersection for them. Usually they have some of their own people do that. We will start the race, make sure it gets off okay. Like the run to Reed this coming Saturday. An officer will be there to make sure traffic stays out of the way and people get going. But for the run and walks, we
Okay, I didn't know.
normally do not. It's the events where they're going to hold it in place in one area and then when streets closed.
Okay.
I know we have two owned by ourselves, the Fall Festival and Field Day. And I guess that falls in historic. They're the same week and the same time every year. And so
that's kind of what we refer to as those historical events, the ones that have been going on, obviously, for years, and that they're always the same weekend or close to the same dates every year.
The only thing we'll be running into is if, okay, if the historical ones, how come we can't do it?
That's, well, and this is what,
we're happy.
staff does not want to sit there and say, whose event is more important to shut
Yeah.
down the street. That's not our job. But the thing is, we are getting a lot of those requests, and then people are wondering, why is the street closed? Why is, you know,
So are they requests by I guess I'm not understanding what the new kind of requests are.
the new kind of requests are probably from businesses in downtown.
Individual business.
Like an
Individual
individual
business,
business?
correct. If they choose to go ahead, I'll give you an example. Sparrow's Nest over here, since they kind of opened up, they've got the parking lot across the street. You probably noticed they had some concerts this summer. A couple times they requested 4th Street to be closed all the way from, original request from Elm all the way over to Lafayette? Or Oak, thank you. And so, for example, we were like, I don't think you need the whole block because there's other people that live there. There's no reason for them not to be able to go ahead and be able to park in front of their home, et cetera. So half the block, at least what you have. So we did that. But I mean, that's just one example. Olivino's down on Main Street. They've requested spots to be closed, at least parking spaces to go ahead and be removed so that they could have additional events or whatever, et cetera.
The downtown was trying to do, the merchants were trying to do like a summer concert series, so there was a band in the block with Olivino, in front of Olivino, and so obviously the Oak was open. Is that Oak? Oak was open, but then John G., so Main Street was closed from Oak to like John G's parking lot.
Has staff said no to anyone?
No.
I don't have a
authority to do
mechanism to do it. Yeah.
Well,
But I mean, other than, I'm sorry, for emergency response purposes.
that, or we had a policy if someone in that block did not want it, that they had to get 100% cooperation.
But I don't know that,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, we looked at, I mean, as a way to do that with the concern that Darren had with Swallow's Nest or whatever, if somebody lived there, for example, how do they get a voice really? So what we tried to do was you had to have the 100% compliance of everyone that lived on the block. Well, the concern there is one person could shut everything down. That doesn't work. So, I mean, we've looked at these different options to try to meet the need and alleviate the concern, and then we really can't find one.
When we discussed that at Traffic Committee, the thing that seemed to be the obstacle also was time. If somebody put in a request and they wanted to do it next week, how can we get to the people, et cetera, et cetera. I think, to me, I don't think every request needs to come to the council personally. And so I think, the Traffic Committee could handle. Now, if somebody wants to appeal one of their decisions, well, sure, it could come here, I guess. But I like the idea of an ordinance spelling out as many of them as you can think of that fit historically, and also a process that includes giving the people time. In other words, a 30-day advance notice or something, so that the Traffic Committee can look at it and decide. And then just leave those to the staff. I don't think we need.
And if they
every one of
didn't
them
get that in within the time, that they're denied. Because-
Exactly.
We just had, to give you an example, we just had a request on Elm Street to go from
October
what?
30th.
From 4th till.
4th to.
2nd?
2nd, correct.
And Chief, I think, had made the comment that, no, we need the streets. That's fine for those individual blocks, but the cross streets, for example, 3rd Street, the traffic needs to be able to go east to west, and so that portion could not be closed.
But with that request came in advance notice, got to the Traffic Committee, we reviewed it, we're good to go. And then I received a phone call on Thursday that they wanted to expand it on the Main Street now. So now it's a 2-block situation. But the issue I have is, the closure really is no different than what we just went through with the Art and Wine Fest.
Right.
It's the same amount of blocks.
It's just a different event.
It's just a different
And it
event.
seems like a lot, and I think a comment was made that was like, what are we trying to be? Do we want to be like downtown St. Charles, where you've got, areas that are almost blocked off every weekend? Or is it something that, we just want to restrict to a limited number of events? So, think about those.
That
Think
time is
about
a factor again.
You know, they wait a week before and say, I want to spend it. I'm sorry, you didn't put that request in 30 days ago.
I agree with Mark. I mean, you gotta give 30 days. If that's tough if they can't figure out what streets they want closed. I mean, that's just courtesy for the city, my opinion.
And part of those historical events would be parades, et cetera, that we have. I know that the schools can't always give us exact dates of when their homecoming parades are, but I mean, some of those events we're accustomed to. But like I said, but just the new ones coming up, that's the time where we run into a little bit. If you think of any other comments, email them to me, and then we'll probably have something for you to review at the workshop beginning of next month. I don't think we need anything before then. We can keep moving forward as we have with our other requests, correct?
And deny the one on Main Street, though, due to time.
Yes, there was one on Main Street that just came up.
It was October 30th. It was an expansion of the already approved October 30th one on Elm.
Okay. So that, in effect, would be, we would deny that because we haven't really had a chance to review it. Everybody good with that? So if you think of anything else that you want to add, let us know, and we'll get an ordinance prepared. Other than that, I have one item for you in executive session.
Council comments?
I think just to recognize the newspaper that won every award in the Western Hemisphere the other day. 50-something gold medals. Good job.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Okay.
City Attorney's Report, public vote on whether or not to hold a closed meeting to discuss personnel, legal, and real estate matters pursuant to Section 610.021 RSMO 2000. Sullentrop, Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Scornia. Pettit.
Aye.
Reed.
Yep.
Hydrich. Patke.
Yes.
Wessels.
Okay.